let me just put this on first. Mainly, we'll do our Q&A, but then at the end, when we're done with our Q&A, I'll close with the Bengali song. I won't sing it. I'll just read the one translation of it called "And Let Shyama Dance There." Those two together, Kali the mother and "Let Shyama Dance There," those are Swamiji's two poems on the worship of the terrible. But in other places, he will say, "Face the brutes." You have to, like, in many places he talks about it, but nowhere quite so ecstatically and intensely as those two poems. So the main theme is worship of the terrible. Now remember, this lecture is referencing material from a previous lecture called The Radical Freedom of Ma Kali. It's also referencing material from a lecture called Worship of the Terrible. So I would recommend that you listen to those two lectures for a fuller treatment of these ideas. But today we're just using these ideas to answer the question of free will and determinism. So last lecture you heard about determinism. I told you about there is no free will. Sri Ramakrishna's ultimate teaching is God alone is the doer, etc. Today I just wanted to nuance that a little bit with the understanding of Swatantriya Shakti and all that. Like God is not determined, right? So yeah, and you are God. So you in that sense are absolutely free. Oh, and I have to thank Vamadeva. This whole conversation was inspired by a conversation I had with Vamadeva last week on Friday. We were discussing this. Am I free or am I bound? And which is a more helpful attitude to take as a sadhaka, as a spiritual practitioner? And so we are having this discussion, and I told him it would be nice to like give it a whole lecture's worth of conversation. So this lecture, it was mainly because of Vamadeva. So thank you so much, G, for inspiring us with this talk. Okay, so questions, comments, concerns? Let's open the floor. Jaima Yashodhara is saying, "Oh, Jaima, yeah, it is daylight savings. Good, I'm happy. Yeah, no. You came at a good time, I think. If you came an hour in, that's when I just got started." And yeah, if anybody knows the Bengali name of the song and let Shyama dance there, Nachoma something, I forget. But you can Google it and let Shyama dance there, and then you'll probably find the Bengali version of it. Yes. Okay, Melissa, yes, ma. I see Melissa is the, yeah,
Hi,
Jaima.
thank you so much for the lecture. I was just exactly today having trouble with this, like accepting God's will or recognizing God's will in evil, but in my own evil actions, like what I personally, in my own moral compass, consider as evil. Like, why do I still do these things? Like, knowing well and recognizing well that these actions are hurtful for me and for others, but I still do it.
You mean like acting upon impulses, like when you feel like doing something that you know you ought not do, but you do it anyway?
Yes.
And then you think back and you think, oh my God, that was wrong. That action was wrong. And why did I do it?
Yes,
So
but
is it like,
also like enjoying doing it.
oh, interesting. So, okay,
Yes.
it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And I can't believe I wanted to do that and enjoy doing that.
Yes.
Oh, is it like you're dealing with like a guilt or shame response to the action and to more importantly, the fact of enjoying it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Actually, I've been thinking about this a lot in the context of like how those who identify as women are like socialized and conditioned by our culture. So like let's say you're a mom, right? And then you have children. And you have a husband or a wife or something, and then you have a household. Now, a lot of mothers in our society maybe feel really shameful and really guilty for like taking a long bath. Do you know what I mean? Like that there's a kind of self-care that a mother might not feel like she deserves or that she's allowed to have. So maybe a mother who maybe wants to like go back to school and take up a graduate program or maybe like sign up for a ceramic studio downtown and take some time to work on her art, she might not feel like she has that luxury. Because she might feel like it's a betrayal of her spouse and of her children and of her household. So it's almost like when a woman takes on a caretaking role, and almost always a woman will find herself in some kind of caretaking role for the most part, she might feel guilty about doing something for herself, even if is as innocent as taking a bath. I can't tell you how many mothers I have in my life, because I mean, I'm working in a middle school and there's a PTA and like I meet a lot of mothers. And almost always, like, there's this feeling of like, well, I just can't take time for myself. I have to drive the kids to this place and to that place, and then my husband needs this, and my household, I have to clean up this and clean up that. So the idea of taking time to meditate or go on a, God forbid, go on a meditation retreat. What to say of going on like a week long retreat if you can't even like meditate, or what to say of meditation, like you can't even maybe feel good taking a bath or taking some time to yourself. So I think in this current society, even in the first world, like even in the most liberal society, there's still a lot of oppression of the woman, in the sense that she's constantly made to feel as if her impulses, her desires, her actions are somehow wrong in the eyes of society, or somehow like selfish, or that she can't maybe want something other than a monogamous relationship, or she can't maybe want not to be married, or she can't maybe want not to have children, or to take time for, you know what I mean? Like there are a lot of things that women might want. Maybe they don't even know that they want. And there are many women in the world who don't even know what an orgasm is, because their male partners won't ever take that into consideration when they're like making love to them, because like it's not making love, it's like using them as means to an end, and not at all considering their own pleasure. And so like women's sexual health, women's mental health, women's physical health, all of these things are neglected all over the world. And Swamiji recognized this. He saw that there was a great problem in our society, but mainly it was in the fact that women in all these different societies were in so many different ways oppressed. So like the intuition of feminism is synonymous with the intuition of goddess worship. The idea that Kālī is absolutely radically free also kind of translates into redefining what's right or wrong for a woman. So for the most part, what a woman might be socialized to think is wrong, that she might be socialized into feeling guilty about, might actually be perfectly fine. That's a radical thought. Like I have in mind, like say a woman who's in a committed monogamous relationship, right? But then she feels like I just don't seem to get any satisfaction from this. And then say one day she starts to fantasize about potentially having a romantic encounter outside of her husband. In some communities, she would be stoned for having that thought or for voicing that thought. So in more like I see maybe like more enlightened communities, maybe she could express that to her husband, and maybe her husband would be willing to, I don't know, like facilitate it, be like, oh, like maybe we should open our marriage, or if this is important for your self-discovery or something like that. But notice how many barriers of entry there are for that woman. First of all, to even have that thought, to recognize that she had that thought. Second of all, to feel like it's okay and part of her self-discovery. Maybe she got married too young or something like that, or maybe she's gay and then she was just socialized to thinking that she should be in a heteronormative marriage or something, and maybe she needs to explore that. Or maybe she wants to go travel, or wants to do something artistic, or start a business or something. All of these desires, whatever they may be, in whatever realm of that woman's life, she might not, first of all, be aware of them, because she doesn't give herself space to feel them. And secondly, if she feels them, she might immediately shut them down because she feels like in her life, there's no scope to express them. And all of this comes out ultimately as a feeling of like guilt or shame for even having that desire in the first place. Okay, so a lot of women won't be able to express their desire, won't be able to act on their desire. Now, there's a rare woman who will, maybe because she lives in a more empowered society where there's a bit more social freedom and understanding around these things. So then maybe she acts on it, right? She like says, okay, like, you know what? I want to start a business, or I want to take a bath, or I want to explore a non-monogamous relationship, or I want to explore being gay or being bi or something, like whatever her desire might be, let's say. Say she decides to act on it. She has the courage to not only admit that she has the desire, but also she has the courage to follow through with that desire in the name of her own exploration, empowerment journey. Okay, let's say that. Usually, if she does express that desire, she might get a backlash for it. No matter how enlightened that society might be, she might find that there's a backlash. People judge her for it, or they make her feel bad for it. Or even if they don't, even in the rare case that there isn't a backlash, she might have internalized that that desire was wrong. So even while she's carrying it out to conclusion, to fully explore that possibility, she might still feel like this desire was wrong, its expression was wrong, and the fact that I am enjoying it is deeply wrong. Maybe even in one case, she cheats on her husband. Why is she cheating on her husband? First of all, because she couldn't honestly express to him that maybe she's gay, or maybe she like desires something outside of her marriage, or maybe she has more of an exploration, like something. So she doesn't admit it to her husband. But then one day she feels like the force of the expression is too strong, and maybe she like has an illicit affair with somebody at work or something like that. She feels horrified by this, that she should even want it, that she should go through with it, and that she enjoyed it. And the shame and guilt like crushes her, and I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of Kali worship, if I may say so myself. Like, if one is able to worship Kali, like truly worship Kali, then one cannot see a woman in a conditioned, socialized way. One would act in every which way to give her the space to just freely do whatever she wants. In other words, one becomes like Shiva. The whole of society becomes like Shiva to give a woman a pathway to her fullest self-actualization, almost as if to balance the scales. Like, for the most part, in relationships, men would be cheating on their wives when they would go off to war or like whatever like that, and a woman would be confined in the home. And then now maybe the tide is shifting a little bit, where the opposite is occurring, much to the chagrin of their male counterparts or something. Maybe there's a balance that's being struck. Who knows? We're redefining so many things in our society. The fact that it's okay to be gay in some societies now, that's huge. That you could be stoned for that in some communities. The fact that maybe we shouldn't mutilate genitals. Maybe we don't need to remove foreskin, or we don't need to like do female genital mutilation. Like, maybe that's a revolutionary idea in some communities. I mean, like, that's huge. All of these, I think, are related to the worship of the goddess, to allowing a woman the space that she needs to, first of all, be embodied, feel her embodiment, enjoy her embodiment, explore that embodiment, and also approach things in her own way, and start businesses and make art and have conversations and hold space in her own way, in ways that are not defined by the institutions that are built by mainly men in this current context. So Swamiji, interested in this idea, was so interested in a matta, a convent that was separate from Belur. So to this very day, Sri Ramakrishna's mission is Belur, but it's also Sarada Mat. And they're different. They're run entirely by different organizations. Because Swamiji knew that if the female monastics were part of the male monastics, over time the male monastics would be calling the shots. And that's how it is in Christianity and Buddhism. In other monastic communities, the male monastics tend to make decisions on behalf of the female monastics. But Swamiji felt that if he had separated the orders and ensured that the female institution would be run by females and that the male institution would be run by males, and I know that itself is kind of heteronormative, but it's still really important. I mean, like, sorry, it's a gender binary, but still really important in that time for advocating for women specifically, that they had their own mattas. So Melissa, I would ask this question. By what standard is what you're doing wrong? And like, let's like maybe more carefully examine the action, and let's ask if the reason we feel that it's wrong is only because maybe we've been conditioned to believe that we're not allowed to express ourselves in the way that we want. Maybe what's missing here is perhaps a conversation with the parties involved in order to more dharmically express that desire, so it's not expressed in a way that makes you feel guilty. But maybe it isn't wrong to want what you want, and maybe it isn't wrong to enjoy, not just wanting it, but enjoy it, whatever it might be. That maybe is one response, a preliminary response, without knowing exactly what you. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you murdered some people, but I would even go so far as to say that's awesome, Melissa. Like, what? Like, kill everyone. I don't care. You're the Divine Mother Kali. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that bad as killing people, but it wasn't as innocent, But if it's not too much information for you guys, then I can share it.
Wait,
like
hold on.
freely.
Let me pause the recording. This I can put it. But the claim here is that actually no. Those I'm going to turn the recording off again, because I think we're onto something really good. It's better without the recording, but hold on. So I guess the TLDR of that is that the actions that we take in our life are supremely good, however bad they may be. Even in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of society, in the eyes of our own conscience, whatever it may be, every action that we take is for our greatest good. Because Mother, in one sense, is taking us through that experience. Again, there's no free will. So we did it because that's just what we were going to do. Our karmas and their karmas were such that when we came together, this action was inevitable. It happened. And I don't have to look back and say, how on earth could it have happened? How could I have been complicit? How could I have done that? How could I have wanted what I wanted? How could I have enjoyed it so much? We don't have to do that, because you have to remember that, like, it was good that it happened. However bad it might have been, however bad the reaction, however much suffering it might have caused, all of that is a higher order good, because everyone involved can then contemplate their karmas, can reflect upon the nature of the experience, and ask deeper, more meaningful questions about what it is actually to be fulfilled in this world. And then by God's grace, life after life after life, we accumulate all this wisdom, which can only come through experience. All education is only through experience. But by God's grace, at a certain point, after innumerable lives, something happens. We like suddenly lose our taste naturally and easefully for anything that is not God. In other words, only the spiritual practices that we do, like, oh my God, look at this fire. Wow. Only like when we do japa or puja or homa, or only when we're in satsang, or only when we're reading and studying, and only when we're doing spiritual activities do we really feel inspired. And we move in the direction of spirituality, which generally means moving away from temporal, transient joys of what you might call the body, mind, and ego. So, like that movement towards God and away from what we call the world is natural, spontaneous, and effortless, but only if we have the courage to actually live our lives and do the things that we want. And only if we have the courage to ask the very hard, very honest question at the end of an experience: did I really get from it what I wanted? Was that really fulfilling? Or is there another way to be in this world? Is there another way to live our life? That question can only come at the end of an experience, arguably. Or for a rare soul, when they're looking at someone else have an experience, maybe they can infer. But I don't know. I'm of the opinion that until you try something yourself and experience it for yourself, you'll never know. Lord Shiva must explore the fullness of his being, meaning every possibility has to be savored and tasted and enjoyed. And as Brock is pointing out, including the experience of guilt and shame and remorse, and like all of those feelings are really good too, because that's also Lord Shiva exploring a particular rasa, a particular mode of his overall being. But there is something to be said for sadhana, for progress, for evolution, for refinement. All of that happens for the jiva, for the individually embodied soul. They go on this journey, and that journey is education through experience. And for that, you need experience. So never regret any experience. That's the TLDR. And I think maybe the deeper point of what I want to say with regards to this particular situation is that we need to rethink our structures in society, in our relationships, in our law, and all these things, which will happen naturally. You'll see, like, over time, the power of the Divine Mother is such that it will filter into every aspect of life. And like Christina pointed out, there will be more avenue for free and unrestricted expression of one's desires, which is great, because then the backlash can come, or reactions can come, then reflection can come, and through reflection comes spiritual maturity, comes renunciation. It's wonderful, which ultimately leads to God, the greatest bliss and the greatest joy. So all of it is maximally good. And Vandana is saying, Melissa, are you expressing that you have liked to acted with the hindsight, growth, learning, heart set, mindset that you have now? That's a beautiful question. So I don't know, Melissa, if you want to respond to
I
that.
don't understand the question.
Vandana, would you like to maybe unmute and ask it?
Yeah, I can. Thank you, Nish. Yeah, so Melissa, like one of the things that like when we deal with shame, is we always wish, or like I've come across it in myself and speaking with other people as well, is this realization that like what we did back then, we wish we had like we wish we had the growth and the learning that we have now, that we can apply, that we could have applied back then.
Oh,
Yeah, and I wonder, does that come across a little bit clearly for you?
well, let me see if I'm understanding the question correctly. Do you mean that I wish that when I did that, I had like the maturity that I have now?
Yeah, you've understood me.
I did it
Is that
today.
It's like if I had known
sorry?
then what I know now.
Exactly. Like, I mean, this happened today. So I was today years old when that happened. I don't know if I'm answering correctly. Like, it's not that I did that like years ago or a month ago or before I came to spirituality, for example. Like, no, I've been I've been practicing more than ever, and I still do that. So that's why I was so confused. Like, I I know exactly that what I am doing is completely wrong, or well, that it's wrong, right? And I still went on and did it, like fully consciously, like completely aware that what I was doing was wrong.
Yeah. No, and this is the important point. Like, that's why we're trying to reframe and redefine what we consider to be wrong. And you're right, Melissa. It's like it's compounded by the fact that we think we should have known better because we're doing spiritual practices, right? It's like, but I know that God is the ultimate satisfaction and fulfillment in life. And yet, why do I care for all these things? Or I'm doing so much sadhana, I'm meditating, I'm doing japa, and yet it didn't protect me and my mind from making a decision that I consider to be wrong. So like that's the reframe I'm going for right now, which is like it's not wrong to express a desire. First of all, it's not wrong to feel a desire, whatever it may be, because desire itself is the energy of the goddess. She is Kamini, the whole universe is her Icha Shakti. And in the human individual, it expresses itself as the simplest of desires. Even that is the energy and the will of the Divine Mother. Obviously, in many cases, Avidya Shakti, because it brings people into more attachment. But even that's wonderful because it's part of the game. Now, any desire is holy because it's an expression of the Divine Mother. If it can be felt, that's good. If it can be recognized, that's good. If it can be acted upon, that's good. Regardless if the person is a spiritual aspirant and there's no such thing as a person who is not a spiritual aspirant, I think. Everyone in this world is a spiritual aspirant, insofar as aspiration is the same aspiration of fulfillment to achieve the ultimate satisfaction and joy in life and to categorically end suffering. So we're all of us spiritual aspirants. But I guess what I mean to say is if you're doing sadhana versus if you're not doing sadhana, it makes no difference. The fact is we feel these desires, we recognize these desires, and then I'm saying it's better that we act upon these desires. Like I'm trying to finish with this idea that it's wrong to act, but I'm not saying that it's somehow okay that everything we do, we just keep doing. No, like it's never wrong to act, but it's good to reflect upon that action and think about whether or not it brought the satisfaction. Not to say that it's wrong if it didn't, but like to think, well, maybe there was a better way to go about this. And maybe in the future, like, because now, like Ruth is saying, you do know now what you wish you had known then. And the only way you know it is because you did it. So you can't regret. You can't look back and say, if only I had known then what I know now. You can't say that because technically what you know now is only because of what you did then. And the reason you did what you did then was because you don't know what you know now. So it would be paradoxical. If you knew now what you did then, sorry, if you knew now, if you knew then what you know now, you wouldn't have acted in a way that brought that knowledge. So thank God I didn't know then what I know now. And thank God I did then what I did so that I can know what I know now. And so the next time you approach the situation, in fact, you might do the same thing and it would be okay. Because maybe sometimes we need to do something many times before we get that recognition. Or maybe not. Maybe you might think back and say, well, now I'm reflecting upon it and I'm realizing there's no real future here. If we just keep doing this, then it'll get boring or it won't be actually good for my friendships or something. You'll come to some conclusion. And so the next time you're confronted with a similar opportunity, you might act differently. And the only reason you're acting differently is because you did what you did. So I'm trying to say, like, it's good, it's wonderful. Thank God everything happened the way that it happened. It's isn't it thrilling? Like on some level, it's kind of fun and beautiful and thrilling.
And I also think I may have gotten some instant karma. I don't know. Maybe I'm using the words incorrectly, but I forgot my glasses in his car, and I have a very, very important exam tomorrow.
Yeah. But
Yes.
here's what I'm saying also, like we have to look, I know that's why I'm like checking it. She's on fire right now. But like this is why I think it's very important. We have to be careful because sometimes the mind it projects narratives like if something is happening in my life, I sometimes think that it's caused by something else that I did when really there's no relation. So if I lose my glasses, I can think, oh my God, I'm being punished. So often we say like this is instant karma. What we mean to say is that I want the universe to punish me because that's the way that I feel like I should be dealt with as a response to the grief that I feel, like the guilt that I feel. Like so I did something, I think
Yes.
what I did is wrong. So now I feel guilty. So I expect some kind of retribution or some kind of punishment.
Yes, that really resonates with my Christian upbringing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I feel like I need punishment.
That's the thing. That's what I'm trying to like dislodge right now. You know, in other words, I'm trying to say like, girl, you're good. Like it's awesome that you did what you did. And I think Ruth is asking an even more important question, a really deep question actually. Ruth is asking, wait, let me pause the recording. This is maybe a bit more personal. Chris's question is interesting also because I think the reason why we feel some guilt is because of conscience. So it's not necessarily not necessarily true that all guilt and shame is conditioned by societal stuff. So like Vivekananda is making a very good point here, which is like he's saying, first of all, he's saying practicing fire safety. Next time LA burns down, it will also be Ma's will just acting through me with regards to the fire. And then, oh, this is also funny. Vandana is saying, Ma thinks this chat is fire. That's the way I saw it too. And she's like, and Rohanji was like, it's nice you have a more positive outlook. My first thought was, look at Ma smiting us. Like both are equally true, right? It's like, oh my God, Ma is like, watch this. Let me practically demonstrate this principle. So then you could say, like, if you want to read into that situation, you could say the fire is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what do we know about desires? They're kind of like a fire. And then what we learn about satisfying desires, from King Yayate in the Bhagavatam, we learn this beautiful teaching. Anytime we have a desire and we try to overcome that desire by satisfying it, it's like putting oil into a fire, expecting the fire to go out. So let's say I'm hungry. If I eat, I'll be hungrier tomorrow. That's the idea. It's like appetite grows by eating. So if I have a desire and I try to fulfill that desire, it's actually stoking the fire. That desire will get bigger and bigger and bigger. So maybe you could say, oh, look, there's a fire over there. And Ma's fire on the altar is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, if I leave it alone and I'm just like, you go, girl, like do whatever you want. In one sense, some people might feel that. There's some devotees of Ma who might just feel fully surrendered to Ma's will, whatever. But what I did is I got up, I went to go check on the fire, and clearly it was starting to like eat up all the cloth and it was starting to get bigger and bigger. And so I put it out. Right? I took a flower and put out the fire inside the ghee lamp, and the fire that was outside the ghee lamp, I took Ma's kamandalu and splashed some water on the fire around the ghee lamp and I put it out. Because if I didn't do that, then it would probably burn up the altar and that probably would chew up the table, and then the whole house would be, and then all the people living in the house, the animals who live here, the people who live here, all of them would have really suffered because maybe we would have all had to, in the best case, gone out on the street while the fire department came, and then all those people's evening is now ruined because they could have just been playing cards at the fire department, but now they're here putting out a fire, and while everyone is standing in their pajamas on the side of the street. That would be the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is many people die before that happens, and many animals die before that happens, and the fire spreads, and then like horrible stuff happens. It's like if I don't put out that fire, there's clearly harm that can result from it. So Chris's question is profound because it's like, accepting all of this logic that it's beautiful to act, it's beautiful to explore one's desire. The question that Chris is asking is, how do you justify acting on desires if it causes direct pain and or harm to others? This is not meant to refer to Melissa's situation. You say that it's good to act on all desires, but do we need not to be considerate of others? Absolutely we do. In fact, that's the purpose of Dharma. When you think about what Dharma is for, it's really just for attaining artha, wealth, and kama in a sustainable and harmonious way that is aligned with the reality of the universe in order to ultimately make spiritual progress. So in the Vedic understanding of the universe, it's okay to want wealth, or rather to want meaning out of life through, like, say, legacy or name and fame or whatever. It's okay to want that. It's wonderful to want that. It's legitimate to want that. And natural to want that. And you know what? It's also natural to want pleasure of every kind. I want to be delighted through all my senses. And I want to explore the full scope of satisfaction in this world, from chocolate cake to orgasms to refined art experiences. All of that is a sensual pleasure worth enjoying, however artistic and heightened it might be. Okay, so if I go about trying to get wealth and trying to get pleasure without dharma, it won't be sustainable. It won't be sustainable for the environment. It won't be harmonious for society, in that it's going to harm other people if I cheat, lie, steal, and manipulate to get my wealth and my pleasure. And it's going to be bad for me because eventually I might end up in jail, or I might get like killed by an angry mob, or I might just feel guilty. Like my conscience might not allow me to enjoy money and pleasure that has come through ill-begotten means. So what the Vedic culture is saying is that if you don't pursue things with dharma, then even if you get artha and kama, it won't be sustainable and it will ultimately be counterproductive to enjoyment. So if you want to enjoy in this life, if you want to truly have a meaningful and fulfilling life, we have to be considerate of others. In fact, we have to be considerate of not just other people, because the Manushya yagya is only one of 5, but we have to be considerate also of like animals and nature. Bhuta yagya, it's called. Then we have to be considerate of the rishis, what they taught us, and we have to like act in a way that honors their teaching, Rishi Yagya. Then we have to honor our ancestors, Pitri Yagya. And then we have to honor the gods, Deva Yagya. So only if an action is sanctioned by the gods, by our ancestors, by the rishis, only if it's harmonious for animals and nature, and only if it's good for everyone around us, should I carry out that action. But even if that action is directed towards artha and kama, it's a perfectly good action, because I'll get artha, wealth, or I'll get kama, and nobody is harmed by it, ideally. Okay, so here's where it gets confusing. This is where it gets really, really, really interesting. Ideally, everything I do should have this calculus. Is it going to harm others? And if the answer is yes, I probably shouldn't do it. But then this gets complicated because almost everything I do will harm others. Intentionally or unintentionally, no karma is neutral, and no karma is entirely good, and no karma is entirely bad. Everything I do will have some negative outcome for somebody. Like Swami Vivekananda said, isn't it good that I'm speaking to you now? I'm giving you some spiritual ideas and it's making you happy or something like, isn't this good? You might say it's good, but it's actually bad, because while I'm speaking to you, the air that I'm projecting from my mouth is destroying all the microbes in the air. So it's like a whole genocide of microorganisms happening right now in the act of trying to transmit spiritual knowledge. So is it good to stand in front of an audience and say spiritual things, even if it's uplifting and empowering for that audience? Not necessarily. It's equally bad, because this action is causing the death of all these microorganisms. Do you see how no karma is entirely good? No karma is entirely bad. Karmas are like a really, really mixed bag, you see? And so what actually counts as harm? I mean, like bodily harm, physical injury, mental harm, all of those things, obviously they're harm. But sometimes harm is kind of subjective. Like, let's say, if I walk in front of a person, they will be incredibly offended by it. Does that mean I shouldn't walk in front of them? If I'm considerate, I might not. But also, it might be unreasonable that they are getting so angry about this action. So there are some people, for instance, I just want to stop the recording in case, I didn't want that to be personal. But the point here is that it's a gray area. Like if somebody does action X and somebody does action Y, who has the right to be worked up? Who has the right to claim to be the victim here? So it's very, very confusing as to what actually constitutes harm, what actually constitutes a right, what constitutes consideration. Like these are really confusing things. And if you try to sit down and think about all of it, you'll go crazy. To the best of your ability, you should act in a way that doesn't harm others. But to the best of your ability, you should also be honest about what you want, and you should try your best to articulate a way to fully experience that, if that's necessary to you, so that you can reflect on the experience. So maybe in the future, the correct course of action would be try to do everything in a more consensual way. And maybe that's not possible. Maybe it's like it's not possible to like communicate and have everyone's consent and to do it in a way that doesn't harm other people. Sometimes it just comes down to the fact that you want to do something and someone else wants to do something, and there's no possible way to avoid the action because the karmas are so complex and so inevitable, and then it just happens. And sometimes when we look back, we realize, oh my God, this whole conversation is based on this idea of agency, the idea of free will. And honestly, we don't have that agency. This is what I'm saying. Like, if you really take today's lecture seriously, you will understand that everything that's going to happen will happen whether you like it or not. Because Ma is playing all the roles. And, you can call it karma. If two people come together, even if they know what they're doing is objectively, manifestly wrong and it will cause seemingly harm to other individuals, sometimes you can even say that karma is so complex, that particular entanglement is so inevitable that the action will happen anyway. You can pin it on karma, you can pin it on the Divine Mother. I'm not absolving people of responsibility. But another way I am, because I'm saying like, all of this stuff is just in hindsight. It's just in retrospect. You will never be able to act the way that you think you should because you'll just do in the moment whatever it is your karmas and your impulses and God's grace will force you to do. That's what I'm saying. Like, you think that you'll be able to make a moral and ethical choice. Do you know, when people were asked the question whether or not they would pull the lever, five people are on one side, one person on one side, trolley problem, a lot of the people that said they would pull the lever, when they were in a VR simulation of the trolley problem, weren't able to pull the lever. In other words, when they could hear the people screaming, when they could hear the train coming, when they could see the lever in front of them, although ethically they're utilitarians, they like can write papers and give lectures on being utilitarians. The fact of the matter was, when they were in the VR and they were actually in that situation, they pulled the lever. Sorry. A lot of people said they wouldn't pull the lever. My bad. The people who said they wouldn't pull the lever, some of them pulled the lever. They couldn't bear to see the five people killed, so they killed one to save five. And many people who said they would pull the lever couldn't do it. They got cold feet and they were just like, how can I kill this one person? They just couldn't do it. But before they were put onto the VR, I forget which university did this study. A lot of them so confidently they were like, "Oh yeah, I thought this through, you guys. I read Bentham, and I'm a utilitarian. Of course, I would kill one to save five." And then in the VR, couldn't do it, couldn't pull the lever. And another person says, "No, I read Kant. I'm a deontologist. I would never lie to the Nazi. I would always do the right thing." And then when time came to prove it, they pull the lever. My point here is that there's no such thing as this like free will. Like at the end of the day, when you're in that situation, you're not going to be doing this thinking, I don't think. You can do it now, but only in retrospect. Or you can do it now, like looking into the future, and that's valuable, I think, because that might help you in that moment. But I don't think as much as we think. I think in that moment, when you're there, these things will just kind of flow through you. So with that said, to your point, Melissa, this is a very deep and beautiful conversation. And like Chris's question is also really interesting. And it's a very nuanced question. But with that said, I think we're putting maybe a bit too much stock on freedom of action. And Vandana, I think it's Vandana here who's saying, could it be that guilt is more about us judging ourselves based on what society thinks rather than what we actually feel about that thing? Or maybe guilt is projected? There's also a world where this person realizes that okay, wait, let me examine. Maybe they put the camera back on. Is what I want to examine more deeply is the fact that, like some people, they say, oh, if you were to go take your bath, hey, you woman who wants to take a self-care nap or something, you want to take a bath, you would be harming your children. You would be harming your spouse because they depend on you. And if you don't prepare their meal on time, they'll be sad. So you better not take your bath. What do you make of that? Because people often hold themselves hostage, or society makes it feel like your action, which is perfectly reasonable and actually perfectly aligned with your own self-expression and self-expansion, they can make you feel like that action is harming others. And with that logic, inhibit your action. So at a certain point, I think a woman needs to develop a kind of like, you're from the 70s, but I'm a 90s bitch. I don't care. Like at a certain point, a woman needs to develop the strength to be able to say, okay, you know what? I feel like I want to do this. I want to do this. Whatever comes of it, I'll deal with. I'll learn to accept. I will apologize, or I will stand my ground, whatever. But like right now, I want to do this. And this is something that I want to express. And so I will. Like that as a Kālī Bhakta, this is what I wish for all women in the world, that they feel free to express themselves fully. And like Riley said so beautifully, I can't only defend women's rights, I want to also defend women's wrongs. In other words, for once in our societal like trajectory, for once in history, I would like a world where women didn't feel so reserved about each and every action as if they were going to be judged for it, as if they were wrong for wanting it and wrong for doing it. And then just like an experiment, maybe this is like the fire that will burn down the whole house. But I'm like, just let's try it. For once, let's just try what it would be like to create pathways for women to express themselves radically and powerfully, regardless of who they harm along the way. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm giving full license to my wife, to my daughters. I don't have daughters, but if I did, to my friends who are all women, I'm giving them full license in a sense as a male like person in the world. Like, just do whatever they want, however it makes me feel. It's okay. because like I'll figure it out, we'll talk about it, well, whatever. But right now, the more important thing is that a woman doesn't get socialized into feeling that what she wants is somehow wrong, that she feels safe enough to be able to not only recognize what she wants, but talk about it, express it, and then to find situations that are as dharmic as possible and as harmonious as possible for expressing that, but also recognizing that sometimes you need a Molotov cocktail. I don't mean literally. I just mean like sometimes those situations won't arise. Like society might not be patterned in a way that is conducive, yeah, maybe literally also conducive to the expression that the woman is looking for. So maybe whatever, maybe she just has to do it, you know? And yeah, is harm understood as intent or impact? Because again, we can't control for impact. Maybe we can't even control for intent because intent might even be contingent upon impact. So I don't intend to harm anybody, but that's bye, Riley. Thank you so much for your contributions. I don't
Thank
intend
you.
to harm anybody, but maybe I do because I don't really understand the full impact. But my intention was not to harm anybody. But maybe I also cannot say that I don't intend to harm anybody because out of the understanding that I can't control for the impacts, I have to accept the maximal possibility. It could harm, it could help, I don't know. But what I intend to do is this particular thing, which feels to me to be meaningful, nourishing, and enjoyable. Sorry, Melissa, do you want to?
No, I just wanted to thank Riley for supporting women's wrongs
Yeah,
before she left.
yeah,
But yeah, I will take this chance to also thank everyone for being so loving.
yeah.
Like, this really speaks how this community is really something else. Thank you.
Jaima, Melissa. I guess like the main thing you're right is that just so you know, like at least now in this space, like we got you, girl. Like I will always think that every single thing that you do, however heinous you think it is, however heinous society thinks it is, I will always stand behind it. Like just personally, like I will always be totally unconditionally accepting of anything that you could possibly do because I think it's good to the core of my being. I think that every single action of yours, every single word that you say, every single step that you say is good because I know in my heart that you are given to the Divine Mother already. You've taken Diksha. In that sense, you're already hers. And everything that happens is her will expressing itself through you. To Rohan's question also, Rohanji is asking, some people say that by worshipping Ma Kali, your karmas are quickened. I don't know about that, Rohanji, honestly, because who knows? It's so idiosyncratic. Like some people have a really smooth ride. There are some people who find that the moment they take Diksha into a Kali mantra or the moment they bring Kali into their lives, suddenly things become topsy-turvy. They get broken up with, maybe there's a divorce, maybe they're financially ruined, maybe their house gets just like burnt up. Like there are stories like this where once a person comes into Kali, their life is totally like torn apart. And there are the opposite stories where people take Diksha, bring Kali. Just a gentleman was telling me, weirdly enough, money started coming into their life. All these good things happened, and they were kind of disturbed by it. It's happening too quickly. So who knows actually what actually happens when Kali is brought into your house? But it seems like maybe the karmas that are already there. I think Rohanji is offering the possibility like she works them out for us. So in one sense, whether or not it's true that Kali quickens our karmas and burns them off quickly, I think so. I think that once you really start spiritual life, whether it's Ma Kali or anybody else, but I think especially with Ma Kali, I think that it's possible that the things that you would have taken the next 3 years to suffer and figure out, you do in the next 3 days. Her blessing is that she takes you through things quickly so that she can show you maybe the emptiness of it, or she can bring you to better things, maybe, who knows, or she clears out all those things that are not conducive to your spiritual life. Maybe a spouse, maybe a house, maybe a mouse, who knows what she's going to clear out or what she's going to bring in. So I'm of the opinion that everything, and even before you bring her into your house as a murti, even before Diksha, I'm of the opinion that everything that happens in this life happens for the individual's greatest spiritual good. I'm of the feeling that this entire samsara has an inbuilt spiritualizing function, that nobody can be in this samsara for long without gradually being brought closer and closer to the ultimate realization. Now, whether that can happen more quickly with Kali, I don't know. I can't say. Because ultimately I only have what people tell me and my own anecdotal experience. Like who really knows how she works? But if it's possible to take Rohanji's suggestion that she quickens your karmas, then we can apply that to this situation. Because Melissa, you've taken Diksha, because you've taken refuge at the Divine Mother Kali's feet, you could say, I accept everything that happens through me by my hand, or everything that happens to me by hers, because ultimately it's all for my spiritual good. So if anything, like if you can take anything away from this space, is that you are so held, you are so seen, you are so loved. We unconditionally love you. I don't think you did anything wrong, and I don't think you have anything to be guilty or ashamed of. I think we all as a community, as a society, have some things to think about with regards to the way a woman expresses herself in this world. But I don't think you should feel guilty or bad. And even if you do, that's okay. That's also wonderful. That's still part of the play. But also, I trust fully that this is good. For whatever reason, like on a deep intuitive level, I trust that this is for the highest good of all the individuals involved, and that this will help you spiritually, actually. Yeah. Good. Yeah. So thank you so much, Melissa. That was so good. And Sai is saying, oh, no. Good. I kind of wish that you could. That would be so fun. But I'm just referring to something in the chat. Okay, so there are a lot of questions actually, and I want to make sure I take them because I saw Ruth. I also saw Rohanji, but I think maybe we might have taken G's question, but if you want to follow up, you can also. Let me just go back because I think before I take Sa's question, I know that Joel G had a question in the chat, and Ruth was kind enough to bring it back. Okay, so Ruth is saying, Ruth is a very good moderator, by the way. So Joel or someone had typed a question above. So Ruth is saying, from Joel, one question for the end. I heard Svatprakāśa say that in Advaita, Swami Svatprakāśa said in that Advaita Vedanta, Svatprakāśa is that light, metaphor for God, reveals itself and no external source of light is needed to show the light. Yes. And in Kashmir Śaivism, Vimarśa says that the light of consciousness has a quality of reflecting upon itself. I think both can be true. Maybe Vimarśa causes Svatprakāśa, like the sun is in friction and from that shines, right? Like hydrogen particles, like that. I asked the question in the chat before, and Sa is saying, I really enjoyed your question. It's very stirring. And then Joel continues, it's like saying this is jada and so on until you reach what you can't classify as jada. And then, jada, by the way, means inert or insentient. And then see the process you took in order to reach there, no? Okay, so Joel G, that's a beautiful question, a very deep question. And I have to tell you, G, when Swami Sarvaprana Ji visits our Hollywood temple, this is basically what we argue about at the dinner table. It's almost every time he visits, every single night of his stay, it's me, Swami Medhananda Ji, Gurudeva, and Swami Sarvaprana Ji, and I'm almost always pushing this point. I'm like, your Svatprakāśa, because remember, he champions Advaita Vedanta, and I'm speaking on behalf of Tantric non-duality. So I'll say, your Svatprakāśa is just Vimarshana, no? And he'll say, no, it's not. So Advaita Vedanta, there's a book called Chitsukhi, and there they have 11 understandings of Svatprakāśa, and they're all trying to show that it's not Vimarshana. So Swami Sarvaprana Ji's main problem with Kashmir Śaivism, and by the way, he doesn't really have a problem with anything. He's in the lineage of Sri Ramakrishna. So he even argues that what makes a good religion doesn't necessarily make a good philosophy, and vice versa. So at the dinner table, I've heard him concede that maybe Advaita Vedanta is a superior philosophy, but not necessarily a better spiritual path or a better religion. Whereas Kashmir Śaivism might not be as philosophically rigorous, which is a point that I reject, but that it might be better, more psychologically wholesome, more life-affirming, more productive for more people, and that it offers a range of spiritual techniques. In our first ever conversation, years ago, Swami Sarvaprana Ji said, Kashmir Śaivism is a very advanced system, and it's very good for very advanced practitioners because it offers a battery of practices. That was the first thing that he spoke to me about regarding Kashmir Śaivism. But over the years, as my understanding has deepened, as our conversations have deepened, as our relationship has deepened, it ultimately comes down to this. Metaphysically, does Svatprakāśa ultimately mean Vimarshana? Because again, if there isn't Svatprakāśa, like you said, Joel Ji, it would be jada. Brahman would be a pot. And this is the language that Abhinava Gupta uses in response to what he calls Shanta Brahma Vada or Advaita Vedanta. He says, you guys talk about pots all the time. Gata, gata, gata. Your Brahman has become a pot. Because what's the point? Your Brahman is just prakasha, just consciousness. It's not even conscious. Brahman in Advaita Vedanta is not conscious. Because to be conscious, you need Chidabhasa, which means mind. Chidabhasa means subtle body, and only when consciousness comes into contact with a subtle body will there be that reflection of consciousness, which means the being is conscious. But when there is no subtle body, the being is not conscious. The being is consciousness. You can't even conceive what that is like. Sri Ramakrishna said it's like a salt doll going to measure the ocean. who will report what to whom? It dissolves entirely before it even reaches the bottom of the ocean. So therefore, you can't describe what Brahman is like. It's not a conscious experience that could be later articulated. So if that's the case, what's the point? It seems nihilistic. Why would I want to be Brahman? Why would I want to become sugar? I want to taste sugar. Or in other words, why would I want to become the kind of thing that is not even conscious? That's like a Buddhist nihilism or some void or some inertia or something. So the claim is that Brahman in Advaita Vedanta and Shunya in Buddhism are undesirable spiritual goals because it's a void state, a nihilistic state, it's a state of inertness. In response, the Buddhist will say, no, it's not that. It's not nothing. Nagarjuna in his 2nd century text, Mula Madhyamaka Karaka, he says, no, there is a supreme reality, Paramartha Sat. It's just he won't tell you what it is. But there is a reality. And the Shentong Madhyamikas will say, it's the clear light of the void or the luminous void. So they're talking about something. So it's not nihilism. And Advaita Vedanta say it's not. Advaita Vedanta will say it's not jaratva. It's actually Svatprakāśa. So it's self-luminous. And that's how they defend against the claim that Brahman is nothing but a pot. It's not a pot. It's consciousness that shines and reveals itself. Now this is where I catch them. Reveals itself. What do you mean by reveal yourself? Reveal yourself to what? To yourself, obviously. So if Svatprakāśa means self-luminosity, the word literally means Swat, like Swa, Prakāśa. If it literally means self-luminosity, doesn't it also mean self-revelation? And the Advaita Vedantin will say, absolutely not. You stop right there. How can the subject be an object to itself? If the subject is revealing itself to itself, what you have here, good sir, is a category error. You're saying something doubles as a subject and an object. That's never true. Drik, drishya, viveka. You have to discern between the seer and the seen. The seer and the seen can never be the same. After all, look at your eyes. Your eyeballs can see literally everything in the visual spectrum except themselves. And by the way, seeing them in a Zoom screen or seeing them in a mirror or seeing them in the selfie is not the same. Like you can never in real time see your eyeballs because there's always a distinction between the seer and the seen, the subject and the object. So if Brahman is the subject, supreme consciousness, in what sense could it be an object to itself? And here's the real problem. It's not just a category error. It's called anavasta dosha, infinite regress. Fallacy. Because if Brahman could be aware of itself, then it could be aware of itself being aware of itself. And then it could be aware of itself being aware of itself being aware of itself. In other words, it could be the subject to the subject to the subject to the subject to the subject. If you have an infinite regress of subjects, you have no subject. You're back to Buddhism. And so that's the problem. Like if you really take this idea of self-revelation seriously, then you're claiming that something can be both a subject and an object. And if you're claiming that Brahman can be an object, and that there can be some subject of it, you end up with an infinite regress. So Svatprakāśa is not Vimarśana, because in Vimarśana, consciousness is aware of itself as its own object. Now the response from Kashmir Śaivism, it's like, no, we're not saying it's an object. Obviously, it cannot be an object to itself. We're saying something special. And what we're saying is that it's self-luminous, meaning it shines, and in shining, it reveals itself to itself. And then they'll say, this is just wordplay. You're like, it's still an object to itself. If it's aware of itself, then it's also an object. And then the Kashmir Shaiva might say something like, no, it's not quite like that. And the Advaita Vedanta will say, it does sound like it's like that. And the Advaita Vedantin, their Svatprakāśa will be criticized as being the same thing, but more hand-wavy. So basically, Joelji, you're asking a very subtle and very complex philosophical question, and the discussion that I've been having about this topic with Swami Sarvapradiji has literally gone on for 5 years now. And there's no resolution except this, and this is what I got finally. The difference is kartritva. That's it. Because one thing Advaita Vedanta criticizes Kashmir Shaivism for, besides this idea of like a subject being an object to itself, is its mysticism. It seems like in Kashmir Shaivism, you get more devotional and mystical claims. Oh, God can do it because God can do the impossible. Durgata Sampadanam. So it's special. God, in God's case, God can be both a subject and an object without infinite regress because God is special. That's a theistic claim, and Advaita Vedanta will reject it because they're ultimately non-theist. And then also there's a lot of like mysticism involved. They'll be like, oh, two things can be true at the same time because it's a mystical revelation. Advaita Vedanta are pure logicians. They reject all these like paradoxical, two things can be true at the same time kind of claim. That's a little too intuitive and a little too mystical, a little too like fluid for them. So All of those are some tensions. But basically, it comes down to this. You can say Svatprakāśa is the same as Vimarśa in this sense and in this sense only. Self-luminosity, revealing itself to itself, making it a meaningful reality. Okay, you can say that. But you cannot say they're the same because Vimarśa has one thing that Svatprakāśa doesn't. And the answer is Kartritva. That's what's the difference. In Advaita Vedanta, Brahman has no agency. Svatprakāśa might be likened to Vimarśa in every which way except this way, Joel. Brahman cannot act in Advaita Vedanta. Whereas in Kashmir Śaivism, Brahman, Shiva, or like the ultimate nature of reality, is endowed not just with Vimarśa, but Vimarśa literally means its active power. Because it reflects upon itself, it's endowed with joy. And through that joy, the world is created, maintained, and destroyed. So if you really want like an actual distinction between Svatprakāśa and Vimarśa, and remember, Advaita Vedantins are very careful to distinguish the two. They will absolutely never accept Vimarśa. And in Chitsuki, they clearly point that out. But if you want a real distinction that doesn't sound so philosophically hand-wavy or weirdly technical and logical, I think this is the distinction. That ours is a Brahman who acts, who creates, maintains, and destroys. Theirs is a Brahman who is. Theirs is a philosophy of being. Ours is a philosophy of revelation. And these are both great philosophies and different ways of understanding the same reality. So don't I think, equate them too quickly. That's what I would call lazy harmonization, which is like, oh, they sound somewhat similar, therefore they must be similar. No, they aren't similar. They're different. But at the same time, understanding their difference, we can still see the unity behind it. We can still say they are different, actually. They're talking about different aspects of the ultimate reality. But there's so much joy to the fact that they can be different because they're two very valid interpretations of an inscrutable absolute. So I hope that helps with that, Joel G. And Zoe's saying, what about enjoying being mischievous, like hiding someone's phone and laughing as they look for it? Oh my God, maybe impulses like this get you wondering why I do this. Yeah, mother is playful. Krishna likes to like do that. Yeah, and Ruth is pointing out, I feel like Kālī has this energy often, teasing us like this. It's true. Yeah, Janam, thank you for saying so. That's a great reflection, Christina. Yeah, like the Scarlet Letter, that's a good reference. Thank you, Vandanama. I'm just making sure I got all these chat questions. But yeah, anyway, I really enjoyed that discussion. I think it was very, very good. And I hope we can see how nuanced it is. And Vandana is adding one more thing here. Existential kink. Yes, there's a bodily hormonal connection with that. It's bad and it harms others. Could it be that we are taking responsibility for others' reactions and not letting them own their own agency and autonomy? I think that's a profound point. And I think that's what I was trying to get at in my own clumsy way earlier. Like, you can't really control for other people's reactions. There's only a certain extent to which you can be considerate. Actually, ultimately, we have to respect other people enough to know that they can handle it. Maybe like we have to respect this other person enough to be able to say they might enjoy it, or they might need it to see something about their relationship they didn't see before, or maybe they're okay with it, or maybe like they won't be okay with it, but they'll recover or something. So I think, Vandana, you've said it very beautifully in a way I couldn't, which is like, yeah, maybe you should respect other people's autonomy by not taking so much responsibility for their reactions. And then, of course, like you could say, like there's murder, right? And there's all these things, but I don't know. I'm willing to say that it's okay for people to murder other people because they're gonna, whether I say so or not. If it's in your karma and if it's in mother's will that you murder someone, however wrong you think murdering is, you're probably gonna do it, you guys. Like, it's a crime of passion for a reason. And you know what? If it's not a crime of passion, if it's like a premeditated act, like it's cold murder or something like that, then you were the kind of person who was already psychologically predisposed to do that. You were like the kind of person that will go and kidnap a hitchhiker and like put them in a box for 20 years in your basement or something. Like, how do you explain that? That kind of person is like, however cold and calculated they were, they're twisted. I don't even say twisted, like mother created them for her own enjoyment. They were created in that particular way. They're going to do what they're going to do, regardless of all these conversations that we're having. So my claim is kind of like just like to accept, not to give up, but to accept that what's happening is happening through us by the Divine Mother's hand, and that actually even murder is something that like we can accept. Yeah, right. And so that's the thing, like you have to be on Swamiji's level to be able to look at all of this and be like, it's all absolutely good. And Ruth is saying, I remember seeing this person make a video describing how she was meditating on a particular genocide and had the revelation that it was because the people dropping the bombs get pleasure from it. It was such a profound realization for me too. And this realization that like actually, very beautiful. So thank you so much, you guys. Okay, for contributing to that discussion. Now let's maybe I don't know if we are actually changing gears, but let's take Sa's question and let's take Ruth's question. Yeah, pleasure motivated. Another way of saying that you could say desire. Another way of saying that you could say it's inspiration. Another way you can say that's like mother's will. Mother's will filters through in the mind as inspiration, which is experienced as desire, which is acted upon as the pursuing of pleasure or the movement towards what I think will be my greatest good, which is typically understood to be pleasure, physical or intellectual or emotional or spiritual. I think there was a what's the name of that particular philosopher? He called it the pleasure principle, that all embodied beings act to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. I think that's true of spiritual aspirants too. We're looking for pleasure, for meaning, for fulfillment, for joy. It's not different from the drug addict. And Swamiji said this also. Like there's no difference between, ultimately, principally, there's no difference between a heroin addict and a pursuing a spiritual aspirant. Both are interested in the same thing, fulfillment, and both are willing to sacrifice life and limb for it. So in that sense, there's a deep camaraderie that a drug addict and a spiritual aspirant have, because both are willing to do anything and everything to attain what they consider to be the highest absolute good. The only difference is that one is slightly more successful than the other in doing that. I'll let you guess which. Anyway, so Sa, I see you. Please feel free. Sorry that took so long, you guys, Sa and Ruth, waiting for so long. But I hope you enjoyed. Yes, Sa, please. Oh, maybe Sa's not quite, maybe not here right now. But yes, Ruth, please. Oh, Sa's there. Okay, yeah, okay.
Whoa, yeah, I literally like passed out and just woke up right before you said my name. So wow. All right. Yeah, we were talking about feminism, and I wanted to share this theory that I have. So I've been kind of stirring with this thought that maybe one of the most radical or enlightening things for people during this aeon of Kali Yuga is that maybe like misogynoir is like the root of what's been going on.
Maybe what? Maybe what?
Misogyn misogynoir is
Misogyn
what,
war, misogyny.
yeah, but
Okay.
noir, so particular to the black woman.
Uh-huh.
And I've been
Oh,
thinking of,
oh, noir as in black. Oh, interesting. Misogyn noir. I've never heard that term before. Misogyny against the black woman.
yeah, I remember I was listening to one of the oh my gosh, the other channel for this Kālī, the older gentleman, and he said something about like warfare, and it was something about like, how do I say it? You people will try to like hurt their their older enemy. Like it's kind of like bloodline warfare. Like people will try to like hurt, let's say for example, like the black woman by hurting black her offspring. And that really got me thinking about like anti-blackness. But I just wanted to share that because I'm just thinking about like the global economy and how the resources, like, yes, to my understanding, Asia is the most like profiting and they're able to manufacture, but the raw materials come from Africa.
Right.
The global economy is based off of Africa. And it's just I'm just noticing all of these different paths of abuse, and it all seems to come back to like the abuse of like black women, whether it be, through exploitation of Africa's resources or exploitation of the black woman's body or just the anti-blackness and the violence. So I think it's really consistent. Um,
Mhm.
Black women, and I'm from the Caribbean, South American, and we were talking about, being confident in your sexuality and whatever is your what is it, kama, your desire.
Right.
And we're so unabashedly okay with that. And I think, yeah, I wanted to share that. That's something that I've been stirring with, and I thought it might contribute to the conversation.
Wow, thank you. So I'm glad you woke up for that. That was a beautiful contribution. Because you're right. The thing about Kali, what's special to Kali, that's why people say a lot of Ardra, Nakshatra, Rahu, Ketu people are often attracted to Kali. It's because often when you come into a religious space or a spiritual space, often you find like a lot of hang-ups about stuff. So in many religious communities, for instance, being gay or being trans or like expressing sexuality in a way outside of like marital norms, all of these things are heavily frowned upon. And you also find sentiments of often racism. So certain spiritual communities maybe are kind of like um, ethnically that particular religion or something. And they might feel that someone who doesn't belong to that ethnic group is maybe, like to use a Sanskrit phrase, a malecha. So that's a nice example. In India, there was this kind of xenophobia that expressed itself as not just like if you weren't a Brahmin, but especially if you weren't Indian, then you did not have access to spiritual practices. So you're like a mlecha, meaning barbarian, in the sense that your mind is not subtle enough to understand the concepts of the Veda. So that's an ethno-religious claim, right? That unless you belong to a certain ethnic group, then you won't be able to access a certain spiritual truth. And of course, like Nazism and stuff like that is based off that doctrine, that there are like truths that are exclusive for certain ethnic groups. That's cool and all. That's one thing. That's one trip. But arguably in the Kali tradition, like in the worship of Bhairava and Kali, you find this emphasis on Bhuta Ganas. This is an important theme in the worship of Kali, that she is surrounded by all those things that are typically rejected by polite society. So Shiva himself is rejected. You know, like Shiva is seen as a ghost, not quite a god, not quite a demon, a sort of antisocial dropout type. But he's not like a rebel or anything. He doesn't have a cause. He just is absorbed in his own bliss and is willing to express himself, even if it means ostracizing himself from the norm. So he tends to attract in the mythology, the Puranic structure of Shiva and Kali, he tends to attract to himself those similar people with similar predispositions who don't quite fit in, who are considered outcasts. So Jesus has this bhava a lot. He hangs out with prostitutes and tax collectors. You know, the idea of like the scum, the lowest of the low that everyone else hates, Jesus especially loves. There's like a fondness that he has for these societal rejects. So that's true of Shiva. He has a special forgiveness, unconditional love, and fondness for what everyone else might call a demon, you know? And that's the thing. Shiva doesn't own others' reactions. They just kind of like do what they want. And so the idea that you're a sex worker, society might have a problem with that. But like Jesus doesn't. Jesus is especially welcoming of such people. And so too is Shiva and Kali. Like Kali, the reason her hair is wild is many, but one thing is it affiliates her to prostitution actually, because the idea is that a wanton woman, an indulgent, sensual woman will have her hair wild and free, and it's one way that maybe in medieval India you could identify a prostitute because she would lean out of the window and she would have wild hair or like kind of unkempt hair or something. You could say, oh, because she just had a client maybe or something like that. So why would she bother to like put a jasmine mala around her hair and tie it up? She'd probably leave it like this, and then she would look for a new client or something. So the wild hair, alokeshi, is sometimes associated to prostitution. So sex workers, like for instance Binodini and Tara, they found refuge in Shri Ramakrishna. Like they were scowled at by the rest of society. Even Girish and Kalipada Ghosh, who were drunkards and opium addicts, they all took refuge in Shri Ramakrishna. Hazra, and I'm thinking of all these people that society has a problem with. They are welcomed by someone like Jesus, Kali, Shiva. So that's unique to Kali and Shiva, I think. This acceptance of the outcast, the bhuta gana like that. So a trans person, a gay person, a woman, arguably, using the narrative that we talked about earlier, a person who is of a different race or ethnic group, like these are all protected, as it were, by Kali. So that's why Kali also has this connection to what is called the Chandala. So a Chandala is someone who's living in the cremation ground, but also importantly outside of the caste structure of India. So an outcast or an untouchable. So we go so far as to deify the untouchable. Matangi is a symbol for the untouchable woman elevated to the status of a goddess. So the ability to see the goddess in all things as all things is a sort of like anti-caste position. And remember, I defend caste insofar as it's an expression of swadharma, insofar as there's no hierarchy, and insofar as a person cannot be defined by whatever they're born into. And we had that nice discussion last week with Vandanama about like caste and all that. But here, what's being rejected is the idea that there's a hierarchy, that if you're a Brahmin, you're somehow better, and that if you're an outcast or an untouchable, you're somehow bad. And so what we do in this particular tradition is we take what society rejects and we euhemerize it or exalt it. And we say, this woman who you would otherwise see as like the lowest of the low, she is now our supreme goddess. She's a prostitute. She's a chandala. She's an outcast. She's an impure dweller of the cremation ground. Then another thing, the idea that Kālī is associated to tribes. So in India, we have these like groups like Santals, Bhils. They're tribals in the sense that they're non-urban communities that don't fit into the caste system of India. And possibly they're like living the same way that everyone else is living. But the assumption is that they have different sexual norms, different purity principles. So in some cases, we might find that these communities are maybe more polygamous, polyamorous. We might find that they are more orgiastic. They might drink, they might eat meat. A lot of the tribals actually eat meat. And that's a big problem because in the Brahmanical sense of purity and impurity, that's considered impure, eating meat. So these people are rejected. And it's very bad because they don't get education, they're oppressed in so many different ways. Now, Kālī is specifically worshipped by these communities. And in fact, you can even say the origins of Kālī as a dark-skinned, wild-haired, blood-smeared.
South Indian in origin, no?
That's the thing. It's hard to say because yes, I mean, in Kerala, like you have a strong presence of Kālī. Did she originate in a Dravidian context? There are scholars like Devdutt Pattanaik who think both Shiva and Kālī are specifically Dravidian deities who make it into the Aryan pantheon like by force almost. That's why we get a lot of like in the Vedic system a sort of reservation about them, which of course, by the time you get to the Yajur Veda and to the Atharva Veda, that attitude changes. So yeah, like there are scholars who say that. I'm not sure that I would because it seems like it's kind of pervasively true of India that many communities in Assam, northeast, you find Kālī, an old ancient worship of Kālī by these tribals. Assam is a great example because they are meat eating, they have their own language, they don't fit into the rest of India's caste system, and they're the most avid worshippers of the Divine Mother, which typically involves blood sacrifice. That's something also that a lot of communities look down upon. So notice, if a person is darker skinned, if they have a different sexuality or a different gender orientation, or if they're insane for whatever reason, by whatever society that's, whatever societal standard there is, if they're considered insane, if they're a user of drugs or other substances, if they are a different ethnic or racial group, if they are an outcast, all of this is celebrated in the world of Kālī, which I think is the unique feature of Kālī and Shiva in this current socio-political climate. It's like this is a specific refuge, it seems like, spiritually speaking, for outcast. And there's clear evidence that like a person who is trans, a person who is gay, a person who maybe belongs to what you might consider an oppressed group, they're much more likely to be spiritual. Like I think just statistically speaking, they're more likely to engage in spiritual practices. And so you could say that that's true of everyone. Like anybody who is spiritual in any tradition, probably they belong to some oppressed group, some outcast group, even if they seem to belong to like what might be considered the majority race or something, you find that they're still in some subsection oppressed by that same group. That's what deepens them. So oppression is almost the best thing that could possibly happen to a human being because it makes them ask deeper and more meaningful questions. So you can say Kālī, she's depicted as a dark-skinned woman because in India, as you know, everywhere in the world, there's a fetishization of light skin. So therefore, it's very important that Kālī and Krishna be black. That's important. That's part of, and it's also important that she has wild hair. It's also important that she's associated to Santals and to Bhils and to Chandalas. And it's very important that they're surrounded by Bhutas and Ganas. So I think to your point, it's true that silicon and germanium factories in Africa owned by like Chinese mega corporations, like the fact that people have to work in those factories without proper protection, the fact that they go blind and they have all these things happen to them because they're mining these resources in factories in Sierra Leone owned by communities abroad. Like that's all true. And it's, I think, particularly important that in this Kali Yuga, that's part of Mother's play and that the solution to the problem is offered by the source of the problem. That Ma Kālī is the reason why all of this is happening, but she's also the reason, as it were, to bring attention to it, to maybe think of new systems. But I think more importantly, to like articulate spirituality through all of this. So Ma Kālī as a symbol, like whatever she is, who knows? But at least as an artistic expression of God, as a symbol, is exactly fitted for this kind of conversation, for this understanding, or for this kind of person, for all of us who find ourselves here. We find that there's something about her imagery and her lore and her mythological structure, and arguably her energy, Ma Kālī's specific signature. There's something about that that offers a unique spiritual solace to people who feel themselves to be outcasted in every other way.
Yeah, as somebody that is experiencing this in real time, um, I concur and I feel affirmed as I've watched other Black Kālī bhaktas. Yeah, they seem to have taken on this technique of going through the eye of the storm or inverting all of the oppressions, and now they are filthy rich, and some people might call them straight up satanic.
Yeah.
Um, you
But
know,
remember, in Kali worship, there is no such thing.
yeah, and I don't have an issue with it. I'm just saying that from the outside perspective, they might see them as, having no morals, but it's kind of like why do people expect for us to play fair when the world is specifically designed to try to destroy us? So, yeah, I thank you for sharing that. I feel affirmed, and yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
and it's kind of helpful sometimes to like dismantle the idea of like an us versus them. Like it's actually just all of us, and the them is Kali. You know what I mean? Like Kali alone is doing everything. She's destroying and oppressing, and she is the source of all the evil and injustice and oppression in the world.
Mhm.
Like the thinking about it that way, and then also thinking that she's also the refuge for all that. And that
Mhm.
non-dual view, I think, can be very helpful.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like especially when we are victimized by those systems and institutions.
I was also. Is this recording right now?
Oh, you want me to stop it?
Uh,
It's back. Go on.
I just had like two. Thank you so much for this lecture. Um, I had two like oh, I had a very busy week, but two experiences this week that I just wanted to share very quickly and like see what you or anyone thought. One was with a middle schooler who I work with, and another one was a dream. Um, last night? Yeah. And I'm very tired at the end of these lectures always, so I know I'm not gonna like do the actual story
No
justice.
pressure. No pressure.
Um, so I work with a I hope that's okay to like share the story. Like I see you nodding and stuff. I think it will be, I mean, it was like really amazing for me to experience. So I work with a middle schooler who is like considered special needs and has like really angry outbursts pretty regularly, just because of like the abuse that he's experienced and whatnot. And he's like the sweetest kid. Um, but and I love him so much and I love working with him. And I'm like so lucky and grateful to be working with him. But it was the end of the day on Friday and like I'm his one-on-one. I'm also a substitute, but I mainly work with him right now. And so yeah, we spend a lot of time together. And like I was about to leave school, but I realized that we had already said bye, and I realized that he had forgotten something. Long story short, he was crying, and like I uh tried to help in a way that was like immediately like problem solving and stuff, which I realize in retrospect was like it probably just needed to be like empathized with. But anyways, long story short, like the point of this was that he like blood curdlingly screamed at me with like looked piercingly like he has very dark eyes and like he's a 14-year-old kid, but it was very like objectively a scary situation. And it also happened to be that like the spring play was that day, so there was a bunch of parents there. And he was screaming like directly at me. And I like I don't know. I just I it when he was looking at me, the my brain just like saw Kālī like in his eyes. Like that is exactly where I went to, and it didn't scare me. Like like it didn't, like I was just able to like, I mean it did, but I was like comfortable almost. Like I'm not quite sure how to express it. Like um and yeah, like my reaction, like it was like a lot that happened. He ended up being okay. Um like but my response to it was just like I don't know. I'm just like so grateful like for being here and like yeah, like I don't know. It sounds like I'm hesitant to like say things like but it's just like becoming more natural to be like Jai Ma and like all this stuff. Like you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I'm not like I said, I had written down like a whole thing, not for this, but like that I'm referencing. But anyways, that was just like really cool. Um Thank you, Sal.
That's the worship of the terrible in action. Like
Yeah,
something that comes through, right? Moments like this.
like I mean, people were looking and he was in such distress. Like what I'm saying is not like I hope that the like energy that I'm giving is not like making fun of his suffering and pain in any way at all. Like it was I am in a professional position of support to him. And it was like a very difficult situation. And I feel like Ma was like, I saw him in that situation, like as her son. And I was like, I don't know, it just felt like understanding. My response actually to what he was trying to communicate to me, which I was able to hear because I was just trying to listen to him, was I like very calmly, like, I know I just like I was trying to get him to call his mom. And I was like, I know, but I think maybe she might have another idea. Like, I don't know. The details don't matter. But anyways, um, and then I wanted to share the dream really quick. Like, okay, so I woke up from it. So basically, I was in this, I will not go into the details because it's going to take too long. And I know that you have the poem to read and stuff. But like the scene started at school and there was an announcement that a kid was making where everybody had to walk on all fours. Like it was the rules now. And nobody wanted to do it. They were all too cool for school. And I shouted at them all. I was like, just play along. Like, come on. And then a lot of things happened. And then I ended up like in this grand, like dark, like above kind of like metal obstacle course kind of thing where we were like chasing each other and it was adults now and I was like running from this person and like um then I like decided to leave like I didn't want to be there anymore and so I ran very quickly and I remember feeling like the feeling like literally feeling when you like have there's a pole and you like slide around it that like force outward I literally felt that like in the dream and then I got on this very tall like ladder um that was in the middle of it and I was suddenly alone on the top of the ladder and I realized how high I was and it was like this really long skinny ladder in the middle of darkness and I closed my eyes because I realized and it was so terrifying and the ladder started I was at the top and it started doing this and I was so dizzy and I could not open my eyes like I knew I needed to just go down like take the steps down to the earth like the ground or not the earth but like the ground to like escape this thing that I'm on. And it wouldn't stop like I don't know if you guys understand like the invalid yeah, I think you probably do. And I couldn't open my eyes because it was too scary. So I just started stepping down. I was like, it's a ladder. I can just step down. I don't need to see it. And I made it to the bottom and I instantly was like with my mother we often talk like we talk a lot. I'm very close with her and like I was recounting what had just happened to her and I had asked her or I had said two things were said I said and I am so upset I can't remember the exact words because I remember right when I woke up it was like so fucking cool but it was something along the lines of like um where did it go I was explaining to her that like I was recanting what had just happened. It was different. iterations. I was moving in and out of episodes of illusion. And then she said, huh, um, what do episodes, and the wording is a little different, but like grounded in reality, as in like not illusion, understand? Like she asked me like basically what the difference is. And then I woke up to my cat trying to pull the curtain on my window down, which is so symbolic and cool because like that's what woke me up, like something trying to pull a curtain down. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to share that in case anything like I thought because it was like, what's the difference? And I guess like nothing was like the answer. Like kind of, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening.
It's the two things you're right are very similar. Like when you're seeing the child screaming, the veil gets pulled and you see Ma, right?
It, it was so cool, like worshiping Kali, and I like want to start a more regular puja practice, but like it was like immediate. Like I was like almost excited. Like not excited, that's not quite the right word. Like, but I just like didn't, I just like, it was almost like a knowing of like what I need to do right now and just be calm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like watch and like be here. I don't know. Yeah.
You become Shiva actually through sadhana in a whole space or something like that. You're like face to face with God in that particular form. And then Gretchen is saying so beautifully.
Never that look that he gave me.
Yeah.
Like he had such terror because he was just so worked up about it was because of a very childish thing, but he just doesn't have very good coping skills. But anyway, sorry.
But to Gretchen's point, like seeing something really scary and recognizing as part of the play, like seeing through the veil, it just curtains drop for a moment and you're like, oh my God, it's a play and this is Ma peeping behind this particular experience of fury. And then you don't get overwhelmed because you know that. And even this statement, like that's very cool. The reason why we say things are cool is because there's deep value in just being calm and spacious, being
Yeah,
like,
all of the because almost all of the staff witnessed it. Like it was the end of the day, people were leaving right at the door, and everyone was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." Like I genuinely was like, "I'm good." Like I really feel like I needed a second to like cool down. It was a very extreme situation. Like any other school, I like am so happy to work there. Like the cops, it's a very capable team, but um
yeah, in
yeah.
fact, that's what Jesus felt. Like people are like, "Are you okay? Like this is horrible." He's like, "No, I'm cool. It's okay.
Yeah.
Forgive
It
everybody."
made me just love my job even more. Like I feel like it's really cool that I'm able to be there for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the revelation from the dream is that like actually nothing is an illusion. There's no difference between an experience that's real and an experience that's an illusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that you are experiencing it is the fact of your experiencing it. There's no like, oh, I experienced it, it's not real.
The fact that I literally felt that feeling of when you're spinning around a pole, like pole dancing or just anything. That feeling where it's like the force, central, whatever
Yeah.
force. I felt that while I was laying in my bed over there. Like literally I felt it. Yeah, I don't know.
Ramakrishna has this cute quote where he's like, you can hold on to the pole of Kālī and spin around as fast as you want to, you'll be fine.
Oh, that's so
Like
cool.
he's saying,
I remember because bits and pieces, it goes quickly sometimes, the dream, but I remember thinking, because it was like quite a it was like there was holes in the ground. Like it was dangerous to go fast. And I
yeah.
remember I'm going very fast. Like, but I was safe. Like somehow I felt balanced.
Yeah, right. That I think is exactly the feeling of Kali worship. And in fact, Chogyam Trungpa described it quite nicely. He said it's like falling through a void. The good news, I mean, the bad news is there's no parachute, but the good news is that there's no ground. So you're never
Yeah,
going
it didn't it didn't seem like there was a ground. It was suddenly a different scene. Or I know I did like roll out of it. I don't know. Anyway,
to
sorry.
like that feeling of like exquisite like fear grounded in safety. There's no ground. In his example, he said there's no ground because there's nothing to hit. But there's also no safety because there's no parachute.
Crazy that when I tumbled out of off of the ladder, I suddenly was in this like beautiful reflection with my mother,
Yeah.
like who is a very unconditionally loving presence in my life. I know that's not the case for all the mothers, but yeah.
But that's the case with Kali. Like Kali, who appears in the form of every mother, is like this unconditional loving presence which steps aside with you and like reflects on the experience of your life. You're like, I'm safe actually.
It was, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what people feel like when they discover Kali, when they experience her for fact, they experience all the war in the world. It's like, my God, I've been like spinning on the top of a ladder, and it's like discombobulating. It's terrifying, but actually, weirdly enough, I was perfectly safe the whole time. But that doesn't take away from the thrill and the excitement, and maybe even the arousal of being in the midst of war.
Mhm.
Yeah. It might be like a unique Leela in Shiva's like infinity, this Leela of spinning around and discombobulated and fearful and scared, but also deeply held by an unconditioning loving presence.
There was like a very like specific moment where I just realized that I could just like I could keep my eyes closed and like continue like I don't know. I'll have to think about it more maybe.
Yeah.
But
And also like just feeling the subtle body and how it can move when the physical body is still, you can still feel deep movements in the subtle body. Like a feeling of falling, a feeling of whirling, a feeling of floating. Like those are all interesting experiments in embodiment, actually.
mm,
Cool. Thank you, Ma. That's good stuff.
let me share, sorry.
Oh, it's great. It's really good stuff. Really good stuff. Thank you, thank you. And I hope I get to come to Colorado very soon. I'm still looking for dates. It'll probably be after June 6th, I've heard. So Kuleshwari told me that Andrew gets back from like a work trip. So after June 6th, maybe. I can come between June 6th and like end of June. Because end of June we're coming to New York. So between June 6th and like end of June, try to fit Colorado in there. Maybe it's part of the journey.
You'll be very welcomed here. Like, yes,
I know.
we're thank you.
Jaima, Jaima. And I guess we should close the way that we started because it's a really good Q&A. Today was really, really deep and meaningful because Vandana is asking like, do we have time for some questions about women empowerment along the lines of the discussion? And there are some gazillion other questions which are also good. So yeah, totally. Please, this is a good, I think a good note to close with because it's along the lines of what we started with. So for the sake of circularity, Vandana, have at it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Nish. Um, so I was yeah, I guess I was contemplating because I've been researching um yeah, I've been researching women's menstruation and or just menstruation and looking at how, like the Indian subcontinent treats it. It's like a normal bodily function that in my perspective has been totally like downgraded and degraded. And I was wondering if you can speak to a little bit more about that because so I'm curious what the perspective of the tantric texts on menstruation because so I mean obviously I understand like asking women to refrain from doing any housework or heavy duty work like yes there might be pain, there might be rest needed, like the actual physical aspects of menstruation can be brutal on a woman's body. But then from an energetic perspective, it's about, where are the energies actually going? Like, are they going up the body or are they going down the body? Which during menstruation, women's energies, they go down and out. So, it's probably using more of different chakras than it's using when women are not menstruating and energies are flowing in a different direction. So yeah, I mean, I understand from that perspective. But yeah, so I was interested in what is the yeah, like what is the tantric perspective on this, if it has any. And yeah, I'm also curious about how the switch, like if there is like, or if you do know, or yeah, if you do know where the switch came in, is how did something that's so sacred, because I mean a woman's womb is the place, the space where matter and spirit is blended together. So it's a very, very sacred space in humanity. And I'm curious about how and when that switch happened that, turned something that is a normal bodily function and is used to meld, creation and spirit, matter and spirit into something that's considered dirty and shameful. Yeah.
It's a beautiful question. In our particular lineage, we go so far into like the reverence of sexual fluids and especially menses. Because like semen is seen as a highly magical substance. But for most Brahmanical orthodoxy, it's a polluting substance. And then female sexual fluids, like female semen, shukra. Shukra is the same word to be used for semen and also for the discharge of a woman during sexual activity, which is different as per the lunar month. So as part of the woman's cycle, there's like different discharges that the tantric texts like value and use in different ways. So for instance, when that substance is sour or when it's sweet or when it's bitter, like they all have different components and different values. But the most valuable thing, so all of this is valuable in this particular lineage of Tantra that I'm in. But all of this is valuable, but nothing is as valuable as menses. Nothing is as magical and as powerful and as sacred as a woman's menses. That's why in Kamakhya, the most important time of the year is called Ambuvachi. Like that's when in June, July, like that, there's like scientifically, what happens is there's iron oxide deposits, and because of those iron oxide deposits, the water that flows out of the cleft in the rock, which is associated to mother's yoni, it becomes red. But it's very interesting that like once a year this phenomenon happens, and that's the holiest time in Kamakhya. When mother is menstruating, it's when mother is in her like most exalted. That's when she's best to be worshipped. Because the argument here is a woman is most powerful when she's menstruating. But not only that, the menses itself is a symbol, like you rightly pointed out, of fertility, of power. And like it's the best symbol for Shakti. In fact, Shaktas go so far as to anoint themselves with it. And if they don't anoint themselves with the menses, of course, like there's a lot of drinking of menses. And the thing you have to understand is like I'm in a very specific part of Tantra where there's a lot of like not only like it goes above and beyond when it comes to reverencing what we call the panchagavyas, the various emissions of the human experience. But even if you aren't actually anointing your head with menses, which is highly encouraged, you're still using kumkum and vermilion, which has the same valency. So the defining sectarian mark of a Shakta is either a red dot on white lines or a straight red line up this way. So I tend to anoint myself and others in the puja with this straight red line that goes up like that. So even if I have bhasma, I'll always put this like straight upward red line like that. So what that symbolizes, the white is symbolizing semen arguably, and the red is symbolizing menses. And a Shakta, like particularly in our particular tradition, we might dispense with the bhasma entirely and just go straight with the red vermilion. Now that's supposed to represent the menses actually. So we're anointing ourselves with the power and fertility and potency of the Divine Mother. So that, but like one thing is I want to nuance this because your question is very precise. Like what's the tantric view on this phenomenon, on menses? But more importantly, what's the switch? Like, why is the view different? I have to really, really, really carefully nuance this so I don't give you the wrong impression.
Okay, sorry. Okay, give me a sec on that. So that's the other question I had is so I'm not actually because maybe I'm a newbie in this community, so I'm not quite sure. Like what is the lineage? Because I'm hearing a lot of different things, so I'm also confused. I don't have words to describe where I'm coming from. So I'm assuming you're coming from the tantric perspective, but
let me just quickly nuance this. Like when we say tantra, we're referring to a really vast like collection of different traditions. So in tantra, there are many different sampradayas. Take for instance Shri Vidya. Now this is a tantric community, and it's a tantric community oriented around the worship of a particular form of Ma known as Lalita Tripura Sundari. Their signature puja is the Shri Chakra puja. So when you see a Shri Chakra, which is perhaps one of the most complex chakras of all time, and it's said that in the Shri Chakra is contained all the other chakras, all the other yantras. So when you see the Shri Chakra, you immediately know this is a symbol of the Shri Vidya. Now the Shri Vidya is one lineage in Tantra, but here's the nuance. Within the Shri Vidya itself, within this one particular school of Tantra, you have what is called Samaya Kula, and you also have what is called Kaula Kula. So within the Shri Vidya, which is called Shri Kula, the family of the worshippers of the goddess Shri, or the auspicious wisdom, that's what Shri Vidya literally means, you'll find two versions of it. One is the non-Kaula form, and the other is the Kaula form. Now in the non-Kaula form, they're still tantric in that they do japa, they do homa, they do puja, they use Shri Chakra, they have all the stuff that would make a tradition tantric. But here's the thing, they're also orthodox and Brahmanical. So they don't reverence the body and they don't reverence menses menses, and they would rather take everything metaphorically. So they're not actually going to use sex as puja. They're not actually going to consume the 5 transgressive offerings: meat, fish, wine, drugs, and sexual intercourse. They're not going to offer a sacrifice of like an animal, and they're certainly not going to revere menses, and they're not going to ingest semen and menses and do all those things that like the Kaulas do. Then within that same tradition, there's the Kaula Marga. And the Kaulas are more likely to use transgressive offerings. They're more likely to sacrifice animals. They're more likely to reverence menses. So you can see within Tantra, even within a single community of Tantra, you have non-Kaula forms and Kaula forms. So in the vast world of Tantra, the vast majority of it, I think, tends to be dualistic, patriarchal, and Brahmanical. So take the Shaiva Siddhanta, for instance. It's Tantric, because the temples are tantric, the temples are founded upon tantric sciences, like the agamas tell us how to construct the architecture. So the temples are tantric, the worship is tantric, worship of tantric deities like Shiva and Kālī and various others. But and not necessarily Kālī, but Devi in various forms, but they have the view that menses is polluting, or that cremation grounds are polluting. So sometimes these cremation ground elements, these Kaula elements, are scrubbed out entirely, or at least like made metaphorical or something like that. So I think most Tantra, I will say, like, just to nuance this question, most Tantra agrees with the Brahmanical orthodoxy of India. But some Tantra, and this is the lineage to which I belong, is called Kaula. And there's no non-Kaula form of Kālī worship. And that can also be debated. But when we talk about Kālī, specifically this form known as Kālī, she's almost always spoken of in a Kaula context. That is to say, there's a reverence for menses, there's a divinization of the human body, there is a kind of inclusion of things like Bali. There's a literalism almost, where we say God is literally embodied as the world. There's so many metaphysical significance to Kaula, but one thing you'll notice is it tends to be associated with fiercer forms. So when you take Kālī or Bhairava, almost always you're going to find a kind of Kaula orientation. But if you take more Saumya forms like Sadashiva or Lalita Tripura Sundari, you're more likely to find Samaya forms or non-Kaula forms. Okay, so I think one very basic way to navigate the complex world of Tantra is to ask this question: is the central deity fierce or calm? In other words, does she have fangs or breasts? That's a kind of a rough way of doing it. If she's a fanged deity with many weapons, then she's probably also a cremation ground deity. If she's a cremation ground deity, then this is a community that probably has different standards of purity or impurity, meaning they're more likely to reverence women. Like, I literally worship women, like literally. Like, I'll put my wife literally on that, like literally do a puja to her. But that they would never do that in the Samaya, because God is God, right? But for me, Viranatha is as good a murti as my murti. Like, I could spit on my murti, because Viranatha, I'll worship him. Like, this is God for me, but literally because God is embodied as the world. But like a non-Kaula practitioner might not have that sense of non-duality. They might still feel like, oh no, the murti is the murti. Like, I have to have ritual purity. And we still do that too. We shower before we take a puja, but still we have metaphysically, theologically, a little bit of it's just as rigorous, but it's different. It has different understandings of puja. So I think we can say that, like, yeah, Lakshmi worship this is an interesting question also, because that tends to be, yeah, definitely very more right hand. But also another thing about right hand practitioners is, this is weird and paradoxical, but sometimes it can be more bhoga oriented. So you're trying to worship along the lines of the Vedas. It's more Brahmanical, but it's not always about moksha. Sometimes it's about like worldly stuff. And that's true of the left also. Sometimes it's about like power, not necessarily even worldly stuff, but just about power, the acquisition of power. But you'll find that generally, Vamachara or Kaula Marga, the goal is moksha, but it's radical. It's very like extreme kind of attempt at getting moksha. So it tends to have more transgressive elements, more goddess elements, and more fierce goddess elements. So I think, to contextualize your question, Vandana, I cannot speak on behalf of all Tantra when it comes to the understanding of menses, because this understanding will change from community to community. I can say this though. In the Kaula form of Tantra, which you'll find in Sri Vidya, which you'll find in Kālī, especially in Kālī, menses, and this is like so true in Assam, like that's Assam and Kamakhya is like arguably that's the place of Kaula or of Vamachara. There you'll see the menses is revered. And when a woman is during the time of her period, that's when she's best worshipped as the goddess. Her menses is consumed. It's used to anoint the head. It's offered to the deity. It's like we're almost obsessed with it. That's one thing. In the Kaula Marga, there's like an obsession with not just a woman and the woman's body, but most importantly, the products of a woman's body, meaning menses, which are offered to God and used in puja. So blood is very, like blood in the Brahmanical context is very polluting. But in the Kaula context, it's empowering. Blood is seen as pure power. So we tend to wear red. One thing you'll notice is that Kaula practitioners, they're usually always in black or red. So black and red are kind of like our sectarian colors. The red obviously represents blood, and the black represents Shiva. Not always. Sometimes they're in yellow. Usually when you see yellow, it's usually Radha, but there's also Bagalamukhi sadhakas who wear pure yellow. So some yellow also, but usually when it's black or red, you can probably tell that this is a person who worships in the cremation ground. Yeah, right. And this is a person who probably worships the goddess and who probably like sees menses as holy. So I think a woman who wants to worship in a temple during her period, that's awesome. In fact, she'll get a lot of benefit from doing so. So my wife, friends, when we were in India, there was this question of like, well, should I enter this temple? Because the Brahmanical standard is no, don't. Right? Like if you're having, it's a time of your month, don't go into a temple. That kind of prohibition is there. And there are energetic explanations for it, like you implied. Maybe there's a lot of udana vayu in a temple. And then when you go into a temple, maybe the menses means that there's a lot of apana vayu. And so when udana and apana mix, maybe you can have a reaction. Along the same lines for why sometimes celibacy is required for very intense sadhanas. Doesn't have to be a lifelong celibacy, but for the 3 months that you're doing a particular sadhana for a particular deity, you might want to observe some celibacy, particularly in the case of men. So then the question is, why? And you could argue that because any kind of ejaculation, especially any kind of loss of semen, is apana vayu. And if that apana vayu were to occur while you're generating a lot of udana vayu, just speaking from a purely pranic point of view, without any social or societal implications, you could say maybe the nervous system gets into a shock, a reaction can come. So sudden apana vayu while you're creating udana vayu maybe can be like a shock to the system. And so male practitioners are sometimes advised to observe strict brahmacharya, at least for the period of a particular sadhana. That's very true in the tantric world. Maybe the same applies to a female practitioner. She might not need to observe brahmacharya the way the male practitioner might, because the loss of semen is regarded as a real detriment to ojas, you could say. But in the same way, maybe she should be careful when she's menstruating because there's apana vayu. She's doing a puja already. She's already sacrificing and releasing that which no longer serves her. That's why maybe there's a lot of emotional and psychological and physical release going on. So if that's happening, if she's already experiencing apana vayu, then if she were to do spiritual practices, or if she were to enter into a temple, maybe that could create a reaction. So she's advised not to. And I think in the best case, like you pointed out, heavy work like doing a puja, it involves grinding sandalwood paste, going around the neighborhood and picking flowers. It's a very labor-intensive kind of thing to do a puja. Not just the puja, but preparing for it, cooking for it. So if a woman is on her like her time of the month, then maybe it's compassionate for a society to say, you are not expected to cook at this time, or do any chores at this time, or like prepare for a puja, much less do a puja in this time. It's better that you just take the time to yourself. You relax, you rest. You're already performing a very important yagya, and people should maybe leave you alone so you have the time and space to digest and process. Like ideally, that structure of a woman being exempt from puja, from household duties, from cooking is there for the women. It's to help them so that they themselves don't feel obliged. A woman might feel like, no, I want to cook for my children, or I want to do the puja, or I want to take care of the household. And then the whole society is like, no, like really, ma, not, like now's the time for you to rest and relax. We got this. And so maybe that's where it came from. I like to think at least. And then when did the switch occur? Well, like we're saying, eventually patriarchal and Brahmanical forms overcome what might have been sensible and sweet and compassionate, and then these become forms. This is true of every religion in the world. A thing starts out as something as a means to an end, and then it becomes an end in and of itself. So the Christ is the best authority on this. He says the man was not made for the Shabbat. The Shabbat was made for the man. So these social conventions and institutions are made to support women. But then after a while, we forget that they're means to an end, maybe, and then we see them as ends in and of themselves, and nobody can explain why, and they maybe offer all these like pranic, tantric, esoteric explanations for why, but they might just be there to support an institution that no longer like is relevant. So the idea is, oh, well, now if she cooks while she's on her period, the food will be polluted. Or if she enters into the temple while she's on the period, she will desecrate the temple. Or if she does a puja, it would anger the deities. So that view, I don't know when it emerged. I would guess sometime before, just right before the Mughals or maybe during the Mughal period. I think a lot of these attitudes towards the body and towards sexuality and towards processes are not Vedic. My feeling, and this again, who knows historically speaking, but my feeling is that the Vedic culture is a very life-affirming, sort of inclusive and positive culture, but possibly because of Mughal invasion, because of the colonial influence of the British Raj, like there could have been more maybe Abrahamic ideas around this stuff. Again, I don't mean to make a dichotomy here, like, oh, dharmic religions are so progressive and Abrahamic religions are so regressive and repressed. I'm not saying that. It's perfectly possible that before the influence of Islam and Christianity in India, it's perfectly possible that the Brahmins did it to themselves. Like Vedic culture itself became ossified, as is true of any tradition in the world, right? So these forms, I'll close with this, maybe were there initially to support a woman in her life, to give her a day off or like a week off or something, but then later became tools for more oppression. And I think it's true though in the Brahmanical view that semen, cremation grounds, cremation fire, blood, meat, wine, these are all polluting substances, irrespective of whether it's like menses or any other kind of blood. Blood is a polluting substance. And maybe this could come from an understanding of hygiene. Like there are communicable diseases that you can get through sexual fluids, through blood, through the consumption of meat, through the consumption of wine. Like this could be just like the use of sage. Some communities argue that sage primarily is a disinfectant, and that's why it's so revered. Like tobacco, sage, these things are revered in certain communities because of like actual practical things that they did for that community. So it could be that the Brahmins' aversion to blood and to spit and to uchishta, like food that's already been eaten by someone else, could just be like an immunity system thing, like an understanding of hygiene and like in a world prior to allopathy, prior to, like Ayurveda and stuff, but in a world where it could be fatal to eat the wrong food. It could be fatal to like contract a disease from somebody, like really fatal, even simple things like the flu or something. Maybe these things, this is just don't take this too seriously. It's just my conjecture, which Indian men are very good at. So please forgive me about that. Because like I don't know that this is true, but it's my speculation that maybe these things come from that. This purity understanding comes from that, but then later turns into an ends in and of itself and then becomes very problematic. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to subverse that, to transgress that in order to free a person from this concept that there's pure and impure. That being said, though, I've done a lot of sadhana in Harishchandra Ghat and Manikarnika Ghat, and I can tell you this as a fact. If you sit there at Harishchandra Ghat from the start of the day to the end of the day, you'll be exhausted, I think. This is true because I verified it with people that I brought with me there, Westerners who had never been there before. They sat there and I never said anything, but they clearly had the same experience where it was like, you're sitting there and bodies are burning all around you and you're in a cremation ground. And then it just exhausts you and you don't know why. You're like sitting there just doing sadhana the whole day. But by the end of the day, you leave the cremation ground, you feel so heavy. There's something to it, There is a tamas, like the tamasic element in the cremation ground. There is definitely tamas in the cremation ground. And that's why I think Brahmins did well to avoid such a place, because of the destructive energies that were there. Wine will wreck your consciousness. Wine and drugs is very bad for spirituality. You'll find it really agitates you. It creates hormonal reactions that are not productive to spiritual life. So sometimes the Brahmins were right, I think, in avoiding these substances, which we Kaulas tend to use quite liberally in the context of sadhana. So it's a rare kind of person, I think, that can succeed at Kaula sadhanas. It's very fetishized. And of course, it's very attractive because we're like, oh, there's wine. But it's not like that, actually. It's sadhana. It's very serious, focused sadhana for a particular deity. And it works with tamasic elements and rajasic elements, which in most cases are deleterious for consciousness. So I do actually want to defend a little bit this Brahmanical orthodoxy, because I think there's something to it. I don't want to say like, oh, they were all wrong about cremation grounds and about blood and about saliva and about, all these things. There's something to it maybe, but my view is that in most cases, we no longer know why we do the things that we do. And these are all structures that have ossified. They've become fossils. And we have to look at them again in the context of our modern world and really ask which ones serve us and which ones don't. And sometimes we don't really have the wisdom for that. Sometimes we don't really know. And so that's why the guru is very important. And so in our particular lineage, when we look to Sri Ramakrishna about this issue, there's a very important incident. Sri Ramakrishna, Sarada Devi used to cook for him. So this actually happened. One day she didn't cook the meal, and Sri Ramakrishna wondered why. And she's like, I would like to, but I'm menstruating and I can't cook a meal while I'm menstruating. And Sri Ramakrishna poo-pooed the idea. He was like, what? There is no impurity in the body. The body is made of bones and flesh and blood. The only impurity, and this is very much in keeping with the Kaula understanding of Mala, the only impurity is the impurity of worldliness, of being attached to lust and gold. In other words, it's only in the mind that one can experience impurity. There is no impurity in substances in the world. There's no impurity in blood, in cremation grounds, in fluids, in food. There's no actual impurity in the world. And Sri Ramakrishna would say, blessed is he who eats pork. It's the most impure substance, eating pork. Meat is already, oh my God, ugh. But pork, can you imagine? Beef is, obviously you can't even talk about that. That's already so crazy. Even the Kaulas will never touch beef. That's oh my God, beef eating is unbelievably bad for consciousness in the dharmic sense of the world. But pork is maybe a close second. So when Sri Ramakrishna says eating pork, that's quite a statement. And he's saying, blessed is he who eats pork, but who thinks of God day and night. That's a Kaula statement. That doesn't matter what you eat, actually, because there is no inherent impurity in food. That being said, I won't touch beef. Why? I don't know. That I can't. I won't eat it. But that doesn't mean I think it's impure. It's just not right for my particular sadhana. But doesn't that mean that but there are a lot of people in the world who eat beef and who are great spiritual practitioners. Do you see? That's a really remarkable point. It's like there are people who are vegetarians who don't touch beef, who don't drink wine, and they're so worldly and so mean. And there are people who eat beef and drink wine and whatnot, and they're so spiritually mature. Clearly, then, food does not have as much of an impact as we think it does. But though I am saying that, I still respect the impact that food can have on consciousness. And I am myself quite careful, actually, about what I'll eat and when I'll eat and in what context I'll eat it. So only in a very highly specific ritual context will I ever touch wine or but not necessarily. Sometimes, here's the thing. It's so individual to the practitioner. So Sri Ramakrishna, the test is not what a person eats or doesn't eat. The test is the quality of that person's mind. And to what extent food affects the mind is different for different people at different times in their sadhana. So some people might benefit a lot from eating fish, whereas at a different time in their sadhana, they might not. The same person, So Sri Ramakrishna says, blessed is he who eats pork, but who thinks of God day and night. And a wretch is he who eats the purest food, ghee with rice, who daily dwells on kamani kanchan, on lust and gold. Again, that same theme, that it's only what comes out of our mouth that is problematic, not what goes into it. So in that case, Ramakrishna, he participated in sadhanas that involved wine and involved siddhi, which is kind of ganja or kind of hemp. He himself ate pork he didn't pork, I think, but he ate beef. He would eat goat. At certain times he couldn't. At certain times he could only touch the goat curry to his tongue, lest he offend the Divine Mother, because goat curry is an important part of Kālī Puja. I remember once I was a very strict vegetarian for 12 years. I still kind of am, but there was one time I remember I was at a Kālī Puja, and they killed the goat for Ma and made a curry out of it. And so I wasn't going to take the curry. I was just kind of getting the vegetarian food. There was a table for the vegetarians but then I was with an Aghori who very much wanted the goat curry. He very much liked it. So I followed my Aghori friend to the goat table, and he got a nice big scoop of the goat curry. And there was a woman there who had this big, crazy hair, and she was big and strong and really kind of intense. So, oh my God, really like Ma, And then she was about to spoon the goat curry into my plate. I was like, Ma, it's okay. Paravale ma, paravale ma. She said, hey, what? And then she prasad, she said, and she slapped it onto my plate. I had no option to say no to this goat curry. And so here's this nice hunk of goat. And it's 4 a.m, okay? That's another thing you have to know is I've been fasting all day and doing sadhana all day. And it was a long Kālī Puja. It's 4 a.m. It's freezing. And there's this hot goat curry in this styrofoam plate with rice. And I haven't touched meat in I think at that time, maybe 12 years, maybe. I might have had a piece of fish here and there, but I never touched meat, So I remember I was such a baby at that time. And then I had this goat, and my God, it was profound. It was a really important spiritual experience for me, actually, eating that goat. And it was not even in the context of panchamakars or something. It was just the prasad from a goat that had been offered to Kālī for that puja, and a wonderful curry that somebody made out of that goat. And then here I am eating that goat, and I've never felt more nourished, more empowered. And the very next day, I barely got any sleep, but the next day I had to do another very long puja. I was like working the event. So I had to do the puja. I was the Tantra Dharak. So I went to the puja the next morning, and I remember feeling so alert, so empowered, so energized. It's very interesting. Then a week later, I was like, wow, maybe I can eat meat now. Maybe that's like something that's open because I don't have any hang up. I don't have any like, I just eat what is good for my sadhana. And so I don't have like a rule or anything. So the next week, I nicely went and got some goat curry from a restaurant I like. I offered it to Ma Kālī and I ate it and I got horribly ill. The same substance, in different contexts. Because that goat curry I didn't kill in front of Ma. I didn't actually cut the neck of that goat in front of Ma. I just bought the goat curry from a restaurant. And I was like, Ma, good news for you. So sad. Ma in this house has to be mostly vegetarian. So I'm like, Ma, good news. Now we can eat goat. You're going to be happy. This house is going to be so different now. I can serve you goat. So I went and got the goat curry. I offered it to Ma in a nice big puja and all. But because I didn't kill the goat wasn't sacrificed. It was just offered. I got sick actually. It wasn't good for me. That next time I ate the goat. Within a week of eating the goat at the Kālī Puja. So again, it's so individual. There's no hard and fast rules, but I cannot deny that food does have an effect on consciousness. What that effect is has to be discovered by each person in the context of their own sadhana. I hate vegetarianism. Hate it. Why? Because it's used as a political tool by Brahmins to make people who aren't vegetarian feel unspiritual. I myself am vegetarian for the most part, but I don't like this idea of an ism, this idea that it's objectively good just to eat vegetables, because that's what all these people focus on only is like what you eat, not what japa you're doing, what spiritual practices you're doing, the compassion and virtues you're practicing, but what you eat. And the judgment is entirely reserved for like your diet. That's what Swamiji really criticized, So although I'm vegetarian, I'm so proud to belong to a spiritual tradition that doesn't put so much emphasis on what you eat. You can eat whatever is good for your sadhana, and you'll know what agrees with you and what doesn't. So in our lineage, we say, eat meat, no problem, or don't. It's not a rule. But it's true, food does have an effect, but not as much as maybe some people think. Now, that being said, Sri Ramakrishna made that statement about Holy Mother's menstruation, and he also made that statement about the pork eating and the havishan or the pure rice, and these are Kaula statements. You can see that these statements are clearly pointing to the fact that menses is not inherently impure, and that actually the opposite is true, that it is very sacred and very pure. So we're in the lineage of Ramakrishna Paramahansadev, and Ramakrishna's lineage is very Kālī oriented, it's very tantric, but it can also be interpreted in a more Brahmanical, more Vedantic sense. So even within the Ramakrishna lineage, you have, like I said in Tantra, you have a lot of variants, but generally on the whole, Ramakrishna sadhus are not obsessed with vegetarianism. Actually, it's a funny story. Once a man, in India, they're so obsessed with this, which I think is good also, but a man came to our Bellarmine headquarters and he offered a crazy sum of money to our President Maharaj at the time, if only he would be vegetarian and encourage vegetarianism in the ashram. And he said, Ramakrishna ate fish, we will eat fish. No to your money. Can you imagine? He turned down a huge donation because he didn't like this idea of a businessman imposing his political ideas, however much they might be dressed up in a spiritual language. So while I think it's good to be vegetarian for many people for health reasons, for ethical reasons, I don't like vegetarianism. And we belong to a lineage that doesn't make this claim that you have to be vegetarian in order to be like realized. In fact, it's individual. It's up to you. So eat whatever you want, and there's nothing impure about any substances in the physical body. So I think hopefully that gives you some sense of the complexity of the answer, Ma. Like in different lineages, they have different ideas, and hopefully you can better place this particular lineage in this particular community as members of the Ramakrishna Sangha. This is our take on menses, on meat, which doesn't mean that everyone in this community is like doing what I'm doing. In other words, like we are a particular aspect of Ramakrishna. We're emphasizing his Kālī orientation, his Tantra. We're emphasizing the more cremation ground aspect of Sri Ramakrishna. But that's not true of the entire lineage. So how's that one? Then I hope that was okay.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very insightful and answers a little bit of my other questions. And yeah, more to come. Thank you very much for today.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that was awesome.
Sorry, what?
No, I was just saying that was really awesome to get that like idea of the dichotomy in how menstruation is approached, because I've only had the exposure to the one side. So yeah, it puts a lot in context for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma. Thank you for asking such a stimulating question, and I'm glad. I hope that was everybody could enjoy. Like, if nothing else, let me at least stress how diverse views are in Indian spirituality and in spirituality in general regarding everything, regarding diet, regarding the role of the body to begin with, regarding the role of the body's secretions, regarding the role of ritual, whether or not ritualism is required. Some communities don't even like to use incense because they don't like any kind of ritualism. And other communities are so steeped in like puja and homa and whatnot. So it's just so wonderful to be part of a spiritual world that's so rich. And it's even more wonderful to be part of a spiritual lineage that recognizes all of it as valid. So I do recognize that some people coming here to this community might be a little bit confused at times because it seems like all views are our views. And that's the way it is, actually. In the Ramakrishna lineage, no view is disparaged. No view is seen as better or worse than anything else, just different. And the understanding is that if God is indeed God, then God is infinitely capacious. She expresses herself in infinite ways, and she can be reached in infinite ways. So we should never begrudge somebody their worldview or their sadhana just because it doesn't really conform to ours. And that you could even argue is it's true of Hinduism in general. Like Sanatana Dharma is perhaps uniquely able to accommodate vastly different views because as early as the Vedas, we sense the oneness behind all these seemingly varied religious approaches. There is only one reality, and it is the one to whom all paths eventually lead, and the one from whom all paths spring. So in this community, you'll find atheists. Many people in this community are atheist, some are theist. You'll find non-dualist and you'll find dualist. You'll find a lot of ISKCON people, actually. Interestingly enough, also, I've noticed there are a lot of like Hari Bhaktas, like Krishna Bhaktas, and that some of them are affiliated to ISKCON, and some of them really aren't. You'll find some people who are associated to Self-Realization Fellowship, and some people who are associated to Kriya Yoga, but not through Self-Realization Fellowship. You'll find many who are associated to Krishna Leela, but not through ISKCON, rather through like maybe what is Nityananda Parivar or something. People who are Gaudiya Vaishnavas but not ISKCON. That's interesting. Or you'll find different approaches to Kālī. Some people are Shaivas, some people are Shaktas. There are Muslims in our community. There are Jewish people of the faith, not just like culturally, but people who are actually practicing Jewish people of Kabbalistic kind of persuasion. You'll find many Christians, different kinds of Christians. So the fact that we have a community that is as diverse as this one is, I think, a testament to Sri Ramakrishna's message. That actually in this space, all views are accommodated, all religious orientations are validated, and we talk about things in a way that seems to resonate with all these different proclivities, which is a testament to the capaciousness, the Catholicity of Sri Ramakrishna's message. So in closing, if this is indeed a lineage of Sri Ramakrishna, then it cannot be boxed into any one thing. It cannot be pigeonholed into any one view. Necessarily, if we are to represent the message of Sri Ramakrishna truly and wholeheartedly, then we have to say this. God is one, but the paths to God are many. All views are valid and all approaches are perfectly valid. And the only role is that each individual comes to discover what there is of the spiritual world and to work out a system that is unique to them and helps them in their progress. And the only question we have to ask is, how unselfish are we becoming? How cheerful, how loving are we becoming? The means to which you get that can be different and it should be different, and each one should be a religion unto themselves. So Swamiji was asked, are you here to preach Hinduism? And he said, God forbid the Christian become a Hindu. And God forbid the Hindu become a Muslim or the Muslim become a Buddhist. I'm here to teach Christians to be better Christians. In other words, Sri Ramakrishna is here not to preach a religion, not to convert anybody. No, there's no sign-up sheet. Sometimes people get scared because we do all of our retreats for free. So they're like, where's the catch? Is this like, do we have to be part of a community? Do I have to like sign up? Like, do I have to give an email? You know how like how the Scientology can sometimes be? It's like, you get the email and you get all the emails. It's not like that. And that's hard for people to understand that we're not interested in money. We're not a political institution at all. We're just representing Sri Ramakrishna, which is the view that spiritual knowledge should be freely given to one and to all. And importantly, that each one should be a sect unto themselves. We are not creating a sect. We are not preaching a religion. We're not converting anybody. We're simply trying to teach universal principles of spirituality that will empower each and every individual in their unique path to God. I think in that sense, this message of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansadev, as interpreted by Swami Vivekananda, is uniquely relevant for our day and age of relativism, of postmodern individualism. Like, this is such a unique message, and I'm so, so grateful that we all get to come together so many times throughout the week to celebrate it. So thank you all so much for coming tonight, for your kind attention and patience. Your presence means a lot. I'm so grateful to those of you who are like whose faces I can see. I'm not. You don't have to. It's never a requirement here, but it helps me a lot to be able to see you and smile at you and like feel like I'm talking to people, and that means so much to me. Again, don't let me pressure you into turning your cameras on. Okay, I just want to like recognize those of you who do have your cameras on. Thank you so much. And every single person who is here, like I can never express how much it touches me that we get to do this together. And you will never know how much I love you, like every single one of you. And like I'm just clicking through this like thing and like looking at all your profile pictures and like just thinking to myself, how wonderful that we get to do this every single week. Wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there I am also. So may all of these words and may all of this time be an offering to the Divine Mother. Jai Ma. Thank you all. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanam Astu. Namo Parvati Pataye. Har Har Mahadev.